The emergence of the Batavi as a distinct Germanic tribe represents one of the most fascinating examples of migration and adaptation in the pre-Roman Netherlands. Archaeological evidence suggests that the ancestors of the Batavi began their southward migration from the Germanic heartlands around the middle of the 1st century BC, driven by a complex combination of population pressure, climate fluctuations, and the magnetic pull of fertile river deltas that promised agricultural abundance and strategic positioning along crucial waterways. Excavations at sites throughout the Rhine-Waal delta have revealed a distinctive material culture that bears clear hallmarks of Germanic origin, while simultaneously displaying innovative adaptations to the unique environmental challenges of the Low Countries. The pottery assemblages from early Batavian settlements show clear stylistic continuities with Latène period Germanic ceramics, particularly those found in the Middle Rhine region and modern-day Hesse. These vessels, characterized by their hand-formed construction and distinctive rim profiles, demonstrate a technological tradition that the migrating groups carried with them across hundreds of kilometers of challenging terrain. The linguistic evidence for Batavian origins proves equally compelling. While no complete Batavian texts survive, the scattered personal names, place names, and tribal designations preserved in Roman sources reveal a West Germanic dialect closely related to the languages spoken by the Chatti Confederation. The name Batavi itself appears to derive from the Germanic root batas, meaning good or better, combined with the tribal suffix orjos, suggesting these people may have originally identified themselves as the better ones or the improved people. This nomenclature pattern aligns perfectly with naming conventions observed among other Germanic tribes of the period, particularly those originating in the Weser-Rhine corridor. The relationship between the Batavi and the Chatti Confederation extends far beyond mere linguistic similarities. Roman historians, most notably Tacitus, explicitly state that the Batavi were originally part of the Chatti before their migration westward. This connection manifested in shared religious practices, similar warrior traditions, and comparable social hierarchies. Archaeological evidence from both regions supports this assertion through parallel developments in weapon technology, burial customs, and settlement organization. Iron spearheads recovered from early Batavian sites display identical socketed construction techniques and decorative elements to those found in Chatti territories, while bronze fibulae show the same evolutionary sequence from early Latène forms to distinctly Germanic variants. The migration itself appears to have occurred in multiple waves rather than a single mass movement. Stratigraphic evidence from key sites like Kesteren indicates initial small-scale settlements dating to approximately 50 BC, followed by more substantial population influxes over the subsequent decades. These pioneer groups likely consisted of extended family units and their retainers, establishing beachheads that could support larger migrations once the viability of the new territory had been proven. The gradual nature of this process allowed for careful adaptation to local conditions while maintaining essential cultural continuities with the homeland. Geographic factors played a crucial role in determining Batavian settlement patterns within the Rhine Delta. The tribe concentrated their primary settlements on the elevated river levees and sandy ridges that provided both flood protection and access to the complex network of waterways that defined the region. The so-called island of Batavia, bounded by the Rhine, Waal and Lech rivers, offered an ideal combination of defensive advantages and agricultural potential. This territory, roughly corresponding to the modern Batu region, featured well-drained soils suitable for grain cultivation, alongside extensive wetlands that supported cattle grazing and provided abundant natural resources. The Batavian adaptation to their marshy environment demonstrates remarkable ingenuity and environmental awareness. Archaeological investigations have revealed sophisticated water management systems, including carefully constructed drainage ditches, raised field systems, and strategically positioned settlements that maximised both agricultural productivity and flood protection. At TL, excavations have uncovered evidence of planned settlement layouts with houses positioned on artificial mounds called turpen, elevated platforms that kept domestic structures above seasonal flood levels while providing commanding views of the surrounding landscape. The material culture recovered from these early settlements reveals a society in transition, blending traditional Germanic practices with innovations necessitated by their new environment. Wooden artefacts, preserved in the anaerobic conditions of the Delta's peat deposits, provide unprecedented insights into Batavian craftsmanship and daily life. Excavated wooden bowls, tools, and structural elements display sophisticated joinery techniques and decorative carving that reflects both functional requirements and aesthetic preferences rooted in Germanic tradition. Batavian religious practices during this formative period combined ancestral Germanic beliefs with adaptations to their riverine environment. Votive deposits recovered from sacred sites along the Rhine, and its tributaries include weapons, jewellery, and ceramic vessels that follow established Germanic ritual patterns while incorporating local elements. The famous weapon deposits at Kessel Lith, dating to the late 1st century BC and early 1st century AD, contain hundreds of deliberately damaged swords, spears and shields that were ceremonially offered to the gods. The systematic destruction of these weapons before deposition follows Germanic traditions documented across northern Europe, suggesting the Batavi maintained their ancestral religious practices despite geographical displacement. The social structure of early Batavian society appears to have been organised around extended kinship groups, led by warrior aristocrats who derived their authority from martial prowess, wealth accumulation, and religious sanction. Archaeological evidence for social stratification emerges clearly from burial practices documented at sites throughout the Rhine Delta. Elite graves contain imported Roman goods alongside traditional Germanic weapons and ornaments, indicating both the maintenance of warrior ideals and the development of new status symbols appropriate to the changing political landscape. Settlement archaeology at Kesteren has revealed the internal organisation of Batavian communities during this crucial formative period. The site features clusters of rectangular timber-framed houses, each measuring approximately 15 by 6 metres, arranged around central courtyards that serve both practical and ceremonial functions. These structures display construction techniques clearly derived from Germanic traditions, with load-bearing posts set directly into the ground and walls of wattle and daub. However, modifications to deal with local conditions include elevated foundations, improved drainage systems, and specialised storage areas designed to protect grain and other goods from moisture damage. The economic foundation of early Batavian society rested on a combination of agriculture, animal husbandry, and exploitation of the rich natural resources provided by the delta environment. Archaeobotanical evidence indicates cultivation of barley, wheat, and rye alongside legumes and various garden crops. Cattle form the backbone of the pastoral economy, with herds grazed on the extensive wetland pastures during summer months and maintained on stored fodder during winter. The abundance of cattle bones in settlement deposits suggests these animals provided not only meat and dairy products, but also served as indicators of wealth and status within Batavian society. The strategic position of Batavian territory along major river routes inevitably brought them into contact with Roman merchants and administrators even before formal incorporation into the empire. Archaeological evidence from the late 1st century BC includes increasing quantities of Roman imports, particularly fine pottery, bronze vessels and luxury goods that were exchanged for local products, including cattle, hides, and possibly mercenary services. These early commercial relationships established patterns of interaction that would profoundly influence subsequent Batavian development and their eventual integration into the Roman military system. The technological capabilities demonstrated by early Batavian craftsmen reflect both their Germanic heritage and their adaptation to new environmental challenges. Ironworking, evidenced by slag deposits and finished tools recovered from settlement sites, maintained traditional Germanic standards while incorporating techniques suited to local raw materials. Bronze working appears to have been particularly sophisticated, with evidence for both casting and sheet metal working techniques used to produce both functional items and decorative objects. The quality of metalwork found in elite burials suggests the presence of specialized craftsmen who enjoyed high social status within their communities. The transformation of Batavian society accelerated dramatically during the reign of Augustus, as Roman expansion into Germania brought systematic contact between the delta-dwelling tribe and the expanding empire. Unlike the violent conquests that characterized Roman encounters with many Germanic peoples, the initial meetings between Batavian leaders and Roman officials unfolded through a complex series of diplomatic negotiations that recognized the unique strategic value of Batavian territory and military capabilities. Roman interest in the Rhine Delta stemmed from Augustus's broader Germanic strategy, which sought to establish the Rhine as a defensive frontier while simultaneously projecting Roman power across the river into unconquered territories. The Batavian homeland occupied a crucial position at the mouth of the Rhine system, controlling access to the North Sea and providing an ideal staging area for military operations deeper into Germania. Roman engineers and military planners quickly recognized that the complex network of waterways surrounding the island of Batavia offered both defensive advantages and logistical opportunities that could significantly enhance Roman strategic capabilities in the region. The first documented formal contact between Batavian representatives and Roman authorities occurred around 12 BC, when the general Drusus initiated his systematic campaigns across the Rhine. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals a sudden increase in Roman military equipment and luxury goods within Batavian settlements, suggesting that initial negotiations involved substantial gift exchanges designed to demonstrate Roman wealth and power while acknowledging Batavian autonomy. Bronze vessels bearing Latin inscriptions, high-quality iron weapons of Roman manufacture, and imported wine amphorae appear in elite Batavian burials dating to this period, indicating that Roman diplomatic gifts reached the highest levels of Batavian society. The negotiations that established the formal relationship between Rome and the Batavi differed markedly from the conquest and subjugation model applied to most Germanic tribes. Roman sources, particularly Tacitus, emphasize that the Batavi were granted foederati status, making them allied partners rather than conquered subjects. This arrangement recognized Batavian sovereignty over their traditional territories, while establishing mutual obligations for military cooperation and frontier defense. The treaty terms, reconstructed from scattered references in later sources, appear to have exempted the Batavi from tribute payments in exchange for providing military service when requested by Roman commanders. The foederati arrangement proved mutually beneficial from its inception. For Rome, the agreement secured a reliable source of high-quality auxiliary troops, while establishing a buffer zone between Roman territories and potentially hostile Germanic tribes further north and east. The Batavi brought particular expertise in riverine warfare and amphibious operations, skills that proved invaluable for Roman campaigns across the Rhine and later military operations throughout the empire. Roman military manuals from the period specifically reference Batavian swimming and boat handling capabilities, noting their ability to cross rivers in full armour and conduct surprise attacks from waterborne positions. For the Batavi, the Roman alliance offered protection from hostile neighbours, access to Roman markets and luxury goods, and opportunities for young warriors to gain wealth and prestige through military service. The arrangement allowed Batavian society to maintain its traditional structures and customs while benefiting from association with the expanding Roman Empire. Archaeological evidence suggests that Batavian settlements experienced rapid growth and increased prosperity following the establishment of formal relations with Rome, with larger houses, more sophisticated craft production, and expanded storage facilities appearing across the tribal territory. The integration of Batavian warriors into Roman auxiliary units began almost immediately after the establishment of the Foederati Treaty. Roman military records indicate that the first Batavian cohorts were organised around 10 BC, initially serving under their own commanders but following Roman tactical doctrine and equipment standards. These early auxiliary units retained distinctive Batavian characteristics, including specialised river-crossing techniques and the use of traditional Germanic weapons alongside standard Roman equipment. The Batavian auxiliary cohorts quickly distinguished themselves in Roman service through their exceptional performance in challenging military environments. During Tiberius's campaigns in Pannonia between 6 and 9 AD, Batavian units played crucial roles in several major engagements, using their amphibious capabilities to outflank enemy positions and conduct reconnaissance missions across the Danube River system. Roman commanders praised their discipline, courage, and adaptability, noting that Batavian troops could operate effectively in both conventional battlefield formations and specialised riverine operations. The famous incident during the Pannonian campaigns, where an entire Batavian cohort swam the Danube in full armour to surprise a Dacian encampment, became legendary within Roman military circles and established the Batavi as premier auxiliary troops. This achievement, documented by multiple Roman historians, demonstrated not only individual courage, but also the sophisticated training and unit cohesion that characterised Batavian military organisation. The successful operation resulted in the capture of significant enemy supplies and prisoners while suffering minimal casualties, proving the tactical value of Batavian specialised capabilities. The recruitment system developed for Batavian auxiliary service reflected the careful balance maintained between Roman military needs and Batavian social structures. Young Batavian warriors typically served for 25 years, beginning their service around age 18 and returning to their homeland as veterans, with Roman citizenship and substantial accumulated wealth. The recruitment process respected traditional Batavian kinship networks, with entire extended families often providing multiple generations of auxiliary soldiers while maintaining their positions within tribal society. Economic transformation accelerated as commercial relationships between Roman merchants and Batavian producers expanded beyond simple luxury exchanges. Roman traders established permanent settlements within Batavian territory, creating market centres where local products could be processed and prepared for export throughout the empire. Cattle remained the primary Batavian export, with archaeological evidence suggesting systematic expansion of herding operations to meet Roman demand for leather, meat, and live animals for military supplies and urban consumption. The development of specialised craft production for Roman markets transformed traditional Batavian economic activities. Pottery workshops began producing vessels designed to Roman specifications while maintaining distinctive Germanic decorative elements that appealed to Roman consumers seeking exotic goods. Metalworking expanded to include production of military equipment for auxiliary units, with Batavian smiths learning Roman techniques while contributing their own innovations in weapon design and manufacture. Roman administrative practices gradually influenced Batavian governance structures without completely displacing traditional authority patterns. Roman officials established formal relationships with recognised Batavian leaders, providing them with symbols of Roman approval such as official seals, ceremonial weapons, and written confirmations of their authority. These diplomatic gifts, recovered from elite Batavian burials, demonstrate the careful attention Roman administrators paid to maintaining productive relationships with tribal leadership while gradually introducing Roman concepts of formal authority and administrative documentation. The construction of Roman military installations within or adjacent to Batavian territory created new centres of cultural exchange and economic activity. Archaeological excavations at sites like Nijmegen have revealed extensive interaction between Roman soldiers and local Batavian populations, with evidence for intermarriage, shared religious practices, and collaborative commercial ventures. These military settlements served as conduits for Roman cultural influences, while providing Batavian communities with direct access to Roman goods, technologies, and administrative practices. Religious syncretism emerged as Roman and Germanic spiritual traditions encountered each other through sustained contact. Votive inscriptions from the period reveal Batavian adoption of Roman religious formula while maintaining dedication to traditional Germanic deities. The goddess Nehelenia, worshipped at coastal shrines, appears to have incorporated both Germanic and Roman attributes, with dedicatory inscriptions in Latin invoking her protection for commercial ventures while maintaining traditional Germanic ritual practices. The transformation of Batavian material culture during this period reflects the complex process of cultural adaptation and selective adoption of Roman practices. Roman-style buildings began appearing in Batavian settlements, but typically incorporated Germanic architectural elements and served functions related to traditional social activities. Imported Roman pottery supplemented rather than replaced traditional Germanic ceramics, with different vessel types serving specific cultural and practical purposes within Batavian households. The development of literacy within Batavian society proceeded gradually through contact with Roman administrative practices and military service. While most Batavi remained non-literate, archaeological evidence suggests that some individuals, particularly those involved in commercial activities or military service, acquired basic Latin writing skills. Inscribed objects from Batavian sites, including military equipment, commercial weights, and personal ornaments, demonstrate limited but significant adoption of Roman writing practices for practical purposes. The demographic impact of sustained military recruitment began reshaping Batavian society as substantial numbers of young men spent decades in Roman service throughout the empire. This population movement created new networks of communication and exchange, with returning veterans bringing knowledge of distant territories, foreign customs, and advanced technologies back to their homeland. The wealth accumulated through military service enabled veterans to establish themselves as influential figures within Batavian society, often serving as intermediaries between traditional tribal structures and Roman administrative systems. The accession of Augustus marked a pivotal transformation in Batavian military organisation, as the emperor's systematic reforms of auxiliary forces elevated Germanic warriors from irregular tribal allies to elite professional soldiers integral to Roman imperial strategy. The establishment of permanent Batavian cohorts around 6 AD represented a fundamental shift from the ad hoc recruitment practices of the late Republic to a sophisticated system that channeled Germanic martial traditions into standardized Roman military units, while preserving the distinctive capabilities that made Batavian warriors exceptionally valuable. The organizational structure of Batavian auxiliary cohorts followed Roman military doctrine while accommodating traditional Germanic leadership patterns and fighting techniques. Each cohort comprised approximately 480 infantry soldiers organized into 6 centuries of 80 men, commanded by Roman centurions who worked closely with Batavian decurions, responsible for maintaining tribal customs and ensuring effective communication between Roman officers and Germanic troops. This dual command structure proved remarkably effective, combining Roman tactical discipline with Germanic initiative and adaptability in challenging combat situations. Archaeological evidence from military installations across the empire reveals the distinctive equipment and organization of Batavian units during the early imperial period. Excavations at Chester, Caerleon, and other frontier fortresses have uncovered specialized gear that reflects Batavian amphibious capabilities, including waterproofed leather containers for river crossings, modified shields designed for swimming operations, and distinctive spear points optimized for both mounted and dismounted combat. The famous Batavian oval shields, reinforced with iron bosses and decorated with tribal symbols, became instantly recognizable throughout Roman military circles as markers of elite auxiliary status. The recruitment system developed under Augustus established formal quotas and procedures that balanced Roman military needs with Batavian demographic realities. Annual levies typically drew between 200 and 300 young warriors from the tribal territory, representing roughly 5% of the male population of military age. This recruitment rate provided sufficient manpower for Roman operations while avoiding demographic disruption that might destabilize Batavian society. The selection process favored individuals who demonstrated swimming proficiency, horsemanship skills, and the physical attributes necessary for specialized riverine operations. Training protocols for Batavian recruits combined standard Roman military instruction with specialized techniques that exploited their natural advantages in aquatic environments. Military manuals from the period describe elaborate exercises where Batavian soldiers practiced crossing rivers in full armour, conducting amphibious assaults against fortified positions, and coordinating complex manoeuvres involving both mounted and dismounted troops operating from waterborne platforms. These training regimens, conducted at specialised facilities along the Rhine, produced soldiers capable of operations impossible for conventional Roman legions. The formation of the Batavian Guard represented the apex of Germanic military integration into Roman imperial service, as Augustus selected the most accomplished Batavian warriors to serve as his personal bodyguards within the imperial palace complex. The Custodes Corporis, as these elite troops were formally designated, numbered approximately 500 men organised into a single cohort under the direct command of a Roman tribune who reported exclusively to the emperor. Unlike other auxiliary units, the Batavian Guard enjoyed permanent residence in Rome, occupying barracks adjacent to the Palatine Hill and participating in imperial ceremonies as visible symbols of Augustus's authority over Germanic peoples. The selection criteria for the Batavian Guard exceeded even the demanding standards applied to Praetorian recruitment, requiring candidates to demonstrate exceptional physical prowess, unwavering loyalty, and sophisticated understanding of both Germanic and Roman cultural protocols. Prospective guardsmen underwent rigorous testing that included swimming endurance trials, mounted combat demonstrations, and complex loyalty oaths administered in both Latin and Germanic dialects. The psychological impact of these towering Germanic warriors, typically standing over 6 feet tall and bearing distinctive tribal tattoos and hairstyles, reinforced Augustus's image as a ruler who commanded respect from Rome's most formidable enemies. The daily responsibilities of the Batavian Guard extended far beyond ceremonial functions to encompass genuine security operations within the imperial household. Archaeological evidence from the Palatine excavations reveals specialized quarters equipped with Germanic weapons alongside Roman military gear, suggesting these troops maintained their traditional fighting capabilities while adapting to urban security requirements. Written sources describe Batavian guardsmen accompanying Augustus on hunting expeditions, diplomatic missions, and public appearances throughout the city, serving as both protectors and visible demonstrations of imperial power. The prestigious status accorded to Batavian Guard service created powerful incentives for military excellence throughout the broader auxiliary system, as outstanding performance in regular cohorts could lead to selection for imperial service. This career progression encouraged competitive excellence among Batavian units stationed across the empire, with commanders regularly submitting recommendations for soldiers who demonstrated exceptional courage, skill, or leadership potential. The promise of advancement to guard status motivated individual achievement, while reinforcing unit cohesion and professional standards. Military campaigns in Britain provided the most dramatic demonstration of Batavian tactical capabilities, as their amphibious expertise proved decisive in several crucial engagements during the Claudian conquest. The crossing of the Medway in 43 AD showcased Batavian river warfare techniques on a strategic scale, as Germanic auxiliaries swam the river in full armour to establish bridgeheads that enabled Roman legions to outflank British defensive positions. This operation, described in detail by Cassius Dio, involved over 1,000 Batavian soldiers who crossed the river at night, surprised British sentries, and held their positions against counterattacks until Roman engineers could construct permanent bridges. The psychological impact of Batavian amphibious operations extended beyond their immediate tactical value, as British warriors had never encountered soldiers capable of such aquatic manoeuvres. Contemporary accounts describe the terror induced by Germanic warriors emerging from rivers like supernatural beings, their distinctive war cries echoing across the water as they formed battle lines on supposedly secure riverbanks. This psychological advantage proved particularly valuable during the siege of Camulodunum, where Batavian units used river approaches to infiltrate British strongholds and open gates for conventional Roman assault forces. Subsequent British campaigns demonstrated the versatility of Batavian military capabilities beyond their famous amphibious specializations. During operations in Wales between 47 and 51 AD, Batavian cohorts adapted their river crossing techniques to mountain warfare, using their exceptional physical conditioning and unit cohesion to conduct difficult operations in challenging terrain. The Siege of Anglesey in 60 AD required Batavian engineers to construct specialized boats capable of transporting cavalry across the Menai Strait, demonstrating their technological innovation alongside martial prowess. Germanic frontier operations provided additional opportunities for Batavian units to distinguish themselves while serving in familiar geographical environments. The campaigns of Germanicus between 14 and 16 AD employed Batavian cohorts as reconnaissance forces and rapid response units capable of operating independently behind enemy lines. Their intimate knowledge of Germanic tribal customs, languages, and territorial boundaries made them invaluable for intelligence gathering and diplomatic missions that required cultural sensitivity alongside military capability. The famous raid on the Cherusci stronghold at the Weser River demonstrated Batavian operational independence and tactical sophistication. A single Batavian cohort operating without Roman legionary support penetrated 50 miles into hostile territory to rescue Roman prisoners and recover legion standards lost during the Varus disaster. This mission, accomplished through a combination of deception, rapid movement, and precise timing, restored Roman prestige while showcasing the exceptional capabilities of Germanic auxiliary troops under competent leadership. Danube frontier operations during the reigns of Tiberius and Claudius provided Batavian units with extensive combat experience against Dacian and Sarmatian opponents whose fighting techniques differed significantly from Germanic and British methods. These campaigns required tactical adaptations that demonstrated Batavian flexibility and professional competence. Archaeological evidence from Dacia reveals Batavian equipment modifications designed for combat against heavily armoured cavalry, including longer spears, reinforced shields, and specialised anti-cavalry tactics developed through battlefield experience. The social implications of extensive military service fundamentally transformed Batavian society, as thousands of warriors spent decades serving throughout the Roman Empire before returning home with Roman citizenship, accumulated wealth, and exposure to diverse cultural influences. Veterans typically returned to their homeland after 25 years of service bearing Roman names, speaking fluent Latin, and possessing detailed knowledge of imperial administrative practices, commercial opportunities, and technological innovations. The economic impact of veteran wealth infusion accelerated Batavian social stratification, as returning soldiers used their accumulated savings to acquire land, livestock, and commercial enterprises that elevated their families within traditional tribal hierarchies. Archaeological evidence from the mid-1st century AD reveals substantial increases in house sizes, luxury goods, and craft specialization within Batavian settlements, indicating that military service provided effective pathways for social mobility and economic advancement. Roman citizenship grants to auxiliary veterans created a new category within Batavian society, as these individuals enjoyed legal privileges and commercial opportunities unavailable to their non-citizen kinsmen while maintaining their positions within traditional Germanic social networks. The legal documentation required for citizenship verification introduced Roman administrative practices into Batavian communities, with bronze diplomas and official certificates becoming valued possessions that demonstrated both military achievement and elevated social status. The emergence of a Romanized Batavian elite proceeded gradually through intermarriage between veteran families, shared educational experiences, and collaborative commercial ventures that bridged Germanic and Roman cultural boundaries. These influential families typically maintained residences both within traditional Batavian territory and in Roman urban centres, creating networks of communication and exchange that facilitated broader cultural integration while preserving essential Germanic identity markers. Educational opportunities for elite Batavian youth expanded significantly as wealthy families sought to prepare their sons for successful military careers or administrative positions within the Roman system. Archaeological evidence suggests the establishment of schools within Batavian territory where young men learned Latin literacy, Roman law, and military engineering alongside traditional Germanic skills like horsemanship and weapon craft. These educational institutions produced bilingual, bicultural individuals capable of serving as intermediaries between Germanic and Roman societies. The religious implications of extensive Roman contact manifested in syncretic practices that combined Germanic spiritual traditions with Roman ceremonial forms and architectural styles. Temple construction within Batavian territory during this period reflects Roman engineering techniques applied to Germanic religious requirements, with stone foundations supporting traditional wooden structures and Latin inscriptions accompanying Germanic religious symbols. These hybrid religious sites serve both spiritual and social functions, providing venues for community gatherings that reinforce both traditional identity and Roman cultural influences. Marriage patterns within the Romanized Batavian elite demonstrate the complex negotiation between Germanic kinship structures and Roman legal requirements. Archaeological evidence from cemetery sites reveals burial practices that combine Germanic grave goods with Roman funerary inscriptions, suggesting families that maintained traditional religious beliefs while adopting Roman legal and social conventions. These cultural adaptations enabled successful integration into Roman society without complete abandonment of Germanic identity markers. The technological transfer facilitated by military service introduced Roman engineering techniques, agricultural innovations, and craft specializations that enhanced Batavian economic capabilities while maintaining cultural distinctiveness. Veterans returning from frontier service brought knowledge of advanced metallurgy, construction techniques, and agricultural practices that increased productivity and enabled more sophisticated commercial activities. This technological diffusion proceeded selectively, with Batavian communities adopting Roman innovations that enhanced traditional activities while rejecting changes that threatened essential cultural values. The catastrophic civil war that erupted following Nero's suicide in 68 AD created unprecedented opportunities for provincial rebellion, as Roman legions turned their weapons against each other rather than maintaining frontier security. The rapid succession of Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and finally Vespasian demonstrated to provincial populations throughout the empire that Roman power was neither invincible nor permanent, encouraging long-suppressed grievances to explode into open revolt. For the Batavi, who had served Rome faithfully for nearly 8 decades, The chaos of the Year of the Four Emperors provided the catalyst for the most serious Germanic uprising the empire would face until the barbarian invasions of the 3rd century. The immediate causes of Batavian discontent stemmed from increasingly oppressive recruitment demands and taxation policies that violated the traditional foederati arrangement established under Augustus. Roman commanders, desperate for manpower during the civil wars, began conscripting Batavian youth at rates far exceeding the customary annual levies, effectively drafting entire age cohorts and disrupting the demographic balance that had sustained tribal society for generations. Archaeological evidence from Batavian settlements dating to 68-69 AD reveals a marked decline in young adult male burials, suggesting that recruitment had reached unsustainable levels that threatened the community's long-term viability. Taxation pressures compounded demographic stress as Roman officials abandoned the tribute exemptions that had formed the cornerstone of the original Batavian treaty. The imposition of direct taxes on land, livestock, and commercial activities represented a fundamental breach of the agreements that had governed Roman-Batavian relations for decades. Contemporary sources describe Roman tax collectors seizing cattle herds, confiscating grain stores, and demanding tribute payments that exceeded the productive capacity of Batavian agricultural systems. These exactions proved particularly devastating because they coincided with several consecutive years of flooding that had reduced crop yields and depleted livestock populations throughout the Rhine Delta. The corruption and brutality of Roman administrators stationed in Batavian territory further inflamed tribal resentment, as officials exploited their positions for personal enrichment while showing contempt for Germanic customs and legal traditions. Tacitus records specific instances of Roman officers forcing Batavian nobles to provide sexual services, appropriating sacred objects from religious sites, and publicly humiliating tribal leaders who attempted to protest these violations. The systematic abuse of traditional authority structures undermined the collaborative relationship that had enabled peaceful coexistence, while demonstrating Roman disregard for the diplomatic agreements that legitimized their presence in Batavian territory. Military service conditions deteriorated simultaneously as Roman commanders treated Batavian auxiliaries as expendable troops, suitable only for the most dangerous assignments, while denying them the honours and rewards traditionally accorded to distinguished units. The famous Batavian cohorts that had served as imperial bodyguards found themselves relegated to frontier garrison duty, while new recruits received inferior equipment and training compared to their predecessors. Veterans returning from campaigns reported systematic discrimination, delayed discharge procedures, and confiscation of accumulated savings that represented decades of faithful service to Roman military objectives. Gaius Julius Civilis emerged as the leader of Batavian resistance through a combination of personal grievance, military expertise, and political vision that transcended simple tribal revenge. Born into the Batavian nobility around 25 AD, Civilis had spent 25 years in Roman military service, rising through the auxiliary ranks to command positions that provided intimate knowledge of Roman tactical doctrine, administrative procedures, and strategic weaknesses. His Roman citizenship, acquired through military service, enabled him to move freely throughout the empire while maintaining connections with Batavian communities and other Germanic tribes that shared similar grievances against Roman rule. The personal motivations driving Civilis toward rebellion stemmed from his treatment during the Civil War period, when Roman commanders arrested him on charges of treason despite his decades of loyal service. The execution of his brother on similar charges demonstrated that Roman suspicion of Germanic loyalty had reached levels that made continued cooperation impossible, regardless of past achievements or demonstrated reliability. Archaeological evidence from the period suggests that Civilis possessed substantial wealth accumulated through military service, including landed estates, commercial investments, and political connections that enabled him to finance resistance activities while maintaining the appearance of continued loyalty. Civilis's strategic vision extended far beyond simple tribal rebellion to encompass a broader Germanic confederation capable of challenging Roman hegemony throughout the Rhine frontier. His military experience had provided detailed knowledge of Roman defensive systems, supply networks, and communication procedures that could be exploited to maximize the effectiveness of coordinated attacks. The timing of his revolt, launched during the chaos following Vitellius's defeat, demonstrated sophisticated understanding of Roman political dynamics and the temporary weakness created by competing imperial claimants. The initial phase of the rebellion began in September 69 AD with carefully coordinated attacks against Roman installations throughout Batavian territory that demonstrated the extensive planning and preparation that had preceded open hostilities. Civilis had spent months secretly organising tribal warriors, stockpiling weapons and supplies, and establishing communication networks with potential allies among other Germanic and Gallic tribes. The simultaneous nature of these attacks, targeting multiple Roman positions across hundreds of square kilometres, revealed organisational capabilities that surpassed anything Romans had previously encountered from Germanic opponents. The siege of Castra Vetera represented the most significant military achievement of the early rebellion, as Batavian forces successfully invested one of Rome's most important Rhine frontier fortresses and maintained effective siege operations for several months. The fortress, located near modern Xanten, housed 2 full legions along with auxiliary units and served as the primary Roman military depot for the entire Lower Rhine region. Archaeological excavations at the site have revealed extensive siege works, including earthen ramparts, wooden palisades, and specialised siege equipment that demonstrate sophisticated engineering capabilities among the Batavian attackers. Civilis employed innovative siege tactics that combined traditional Germanic assault methods with techniques learned through Roman military service, creating hybrid approaches that exploited both Roman defensive assumptions and Germanic tactical advantages. The Batavian forces constructed elaborate earthworks that enabled them to approach the fortress walls while remaining protected from Roman artillery, using their superior knowledge of local terrain to position siege equipment in locations that maximised effectiveness while minimising exposure to counterattacks. The siege demonstrated remarkable logistical organisation, with Batavian supply trains maintaining consistent delivery of food, weapons, and construction materials despite Roman efforts to disrupt their operations. The psychological impact of the siege extended far beyond its immediate military significance, as news of Germanic forces successfully challenging a major Roman fortress spread throughout Gaul and Germania, encouraging other tribes to consider similar resistance. Roman sources described the terror experienced by garrison troops who had never faced sustained siege operations conducted by opponents possessing detailed knowledge of Roman defensive procedures and tactical doctrine. The prolonged nature of the siege, lasting from October 69 AD through March 70 AD, demonstrated Batavian determination and capability, while revealing Roman vulnerability when separated from their usual advantages in mobility and supply. Naval operations on the Rhine showcased the distinctive Batavian military capabilities that had originally attracted Roman attention, as Germanic warriors adapted their traditional riverine skills to large-scale military operations against Roman river fleets. The Batavi constructed a formidable naval force using both captured Roman vessels and specially designed Germanic craft optimized for Rhine navigation and amphibious operations. These vessels, described in contemporary sources as low-profile boats capable of rapid maneuvers in shallow water, proved ideally suited for surprise attacks against Roman supply convoys and troop transports. The Battle of the Old Rhine in early 70 AD demonstrated Batavian naval superiority in their home waters, as Germanic forces destroyed a Roman fleet attempting to relieve the siege of Castra Vetera. The engagement showcased innovative tactics that combined traditional Germanic boarding techniques with sophisticated understanding of Roman naval procedures acquired through auxiliary service. Batavian warriors used their exceptional swimming abilities to approach Roman vessels underwater, emerging to attack crews while companion boats provided covering fire with specialized river warfare weapons. Archaeological evidence from shipwrecks in the Rhine system reveals the technological sophistication of Batavian naval construction, with vessel designs that incorporated both Germanic traditions and Roman innovations to create craft superior to standard Roman river ships in local conditions. These boats featured reinforced hulls capable of withstanding impacts with river obstacles, specialized steering systems optimized for rapid direction changes, and modified deck layouts that accommodated both rowing crews and fighting platforms for mounted warriors. The broader context of the revolt encompassed extensive alliances with Gallic and Germanic tribes that transformed a localized Batavian uprising into a general rebellion threatening Roman control throughout the Rhine frontier. Civilis had spent considerable effort cultivating relationships with tribal leaders who shared similar grievances against Roman rule, creating a coordinated resistance movement that stretched from the North Sea to the Alpine foothills. The Treveri, Lingones, and other Gallic tribes provided crucial support through coordinated attacks that prevented Roman forces from concentrating against Batavian positions. The alliance with the Bructeri, Tencteri, and other trans-Rhenish Germanic tribes brought additional military capabilities including cavalry forces and siege specialists that enhanced Batavian operational capacity. These tribal confederates contributed approximately 20,000 additional warriors to the rebellion, doubling the effective strength available to Civilis while providing expertise in different combat specializations. The coordination required to maintain effective cooperation among tribes with distinct languages, customs, and military traditions demonstrated remarkable diplomatic and organizational skills among the rebellion's leadership. Religious dimensions of the revolt provided crucial ideological motivation, as Germanic druids and priests proclaimed the uprising as divinely sanctioned resistance against Roman oppression. The prophetess Veleda, residing in a tower near the Lippe River, issued pronouncements supporting the rebellion and predicting Roman defeat that carried enormous psychological weight throughout the Germanic world. Archaeological evidence suggests that religious ceremonies accompanied major military operations, with votive deposits of captured Roman equipment dedicated to Germanic deities as thanksgiving offerings for battlefield successes. The economic foundations supporting the rebellion revealed sophisticated logistical planning that enabled sustained military operations across multiple theatres simultaneously. Batavian territory provided agricultural surpluses that could support large military forces, while control of Rhine commerce generated revenue through taxation of merchant traffic and confiscation of Roman goods. The rebellion's ability to maintain effective operations for over a year demonstrated economic capabilities that surpassed Roman estimates of Germanic organizational capacity. Military innovations developed during the revolt influenced subsequent Germanic warfare techniques and contributed to the tactical evolution that would characterize later barbarian invasions. Batavian forces pioneered combined arms approaches that integrated infantry, cavalry, and naval elements in coordinated operations that exploited Roman tactical assumptions and defensive preparations. These innovations, preserved in Germanic military traditions, provided foundation techniques that later tribal confederations would employ against Roman frontier defences throughout the imperial period. The territorial extent of the rebellion encompassed virtually the entire Rhine frontier, from the North Sea to modern Switzerland, representing the most serious challenge to Roman control in Western Europe since the Gallic Wars. Civilis established administrative structures throughout the occupied territories that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of governmental requirements while maintaining Germanic cultural autonomy. These temporary institutions provided models for later Germanic political organization, while revealing the administrative capabilities that had developed within Romanized tribal elites. The appointment of Quintus Petilius Cerialis as commander of the Rhine armies in early 70 AD marked the beginning of Rome's systematic response to the Batavian uprising, bringing to bear the full weight of imperial military resources against what had become the most serious Germanic challenge to Roman authority since the Cimbrian Wars. Cerialis, a seasoned commander who possessed intimate knowledge of Germanic warfare from previous Rhine campaigns, arrived with explicit instructions from Vespasian to crush the rebellion completely, while demonstrating to other potential rebels the consequences of challenging Roman power. The Roman military response involved the largest concentration of legionary forces on the Rhine frontier since the campaigns of Germanicus, with 4 complete legions supplemented by extensive auxiliary units drawn from across the empire. The Sittin Gemina, recalled from Britain specifically for this campaign, brought veterans experienced in suppressing provincial rebellions, while Rapax and Via Laude provided the core strength for sustained siege operations. Archaeological evidence from military camps established during this period reveals the massive logistical preparations required to support approximately 40,000 Roman troops operating in hostile territory, with supply depots, field hospitals, and engineering workshops constructed at strategic locations throughout the campaign zone. Cerialis implemented a methodical strategy that prioritized the systematic reduction of Batavian strongholds while preventing Civilis from concentrating his forces for decisive battle. Roman engineering capabilities proved decisive in this approach, as legionary engineers constructed siege works, bridges, and fortified camps that enabled sustained operations despite Batavian attempts to exploit their superior knowledge of local terrain. The Romans established a network of fortified positions that controlled river crossings, supply routes, and communication lines, effectively fragmenting Batavian territory and isolating rebel forces from their allies and supply sources. The siege of Batavian island strongholds demonstrated Roman adaptability in riverine warfare, as Cerialis modified traditional siege techniques to accommodate the unique challenges posed by the Rhine Delta's complex waterway system. Roman engineers constructed specialized pontoon bridges capable of rapid deployment and repositioning, enabling legionary forces to maintain pressure on multiple Batavian positions simultaneously while preventing rebel forces from using their amphibious capabilities to escape encirclement. These engineering achievements required innovation in both design and construction techniques, with archaeological remains revealing sophisticated anchoring systems and modular construction methods that enabled rapid assembly under combat conditions. Naval operations played a crucial role in the Roman reconquest, as Cerialis recognized that control of the Rhine waterways was essential for both supply operations and preventing Batavian forces from exploiting their traditional advantages in riverine combat. The Romans assembled a substantial fleet of purpose-built river warships supplemented by requisitioned merchant vessels converted for military use. These craft, equipped with artillery and designed for shallow water operations, enabled Roman forces to challenge Batavian naval supremacy while providing mobile platforms for amphibious assaults against fortified positions. The technological superiority of Roman siege equipment became apparent during the reduction of major Batavian fortifications, where traditional Germanic defensive techniques proved inadequate against systematic Roman engineering approaches. Ballista and catapult batteries, positioned on artificial mounds constructed by legionary engineers, could deliver concentrated fire against Batavian fortifications from ranges that exceeded the effective reach of Germanic weapons. The psychological impact of this technological disparity proved as important as its tactical effects, as Batavian defenders found themselves helpless against weapons they could neither match nor effectively counter. Intelligence operations conducted by Roman agents within Batavian territory provided Cerialis with detailed information about rebel strength, defensive preparations, and internal disagreements that could be exploited to accelerate the campaign's conclusion. Roman sources describe extensive spy networks that included Batavian nobles who had remained loyal to Rome, Germanic merchants with commercial interests in Roman territories, and auxiliary veterans who maintained family connections within rebel communities. This intelligence apparatus enabled Roman commanders to anticipate Batavian tactical moves while identifying opportunities for diplomatic solutions that might reduce the need for costly military operations. The systematic destruction of Batavian agricultural infrastructure formed a crucial component of Roman strategy, as Cerealis recognized that the rebellion's sustainability depended on the rebels' ability to feed their forces and civilian population. Roman troops conducted deliberate campaigns to destroy grain stores, slaughter livestock, and burn standing crops throughout Batavian territory. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals widespread fire damage to storage facilities and agricultural installations, indicating the thoroughness with which Roman forces implemented these destructive policies. Psychological warfare techniques employed by Roman forces included the public execution of captured rebel leaders, the display of severed heads from defeated Batavian warriors, and the systematic desecration of Germanic religious sites. These brutal tactics, documented in contemporary sources and confirmed by archaeological evidence of destroyed temples and sacred groves, were designed to break Batavian morale while demonstrating the futility of continued resistance. The Romans also employed propaganda techniques, distributing proclamations that promised amnesty for Batavians who abandoned the rebellion while threatening severe punishment for continued defiance. The gradual erosion of Batavian alliance networks proved as damaging to the rebellion as direct military pressure, as Roman diplomatic initiatives successfully detached key tribal confederates from Civilis's coalition. The Treveri and Lingones, facing Roman military pressure in their own territories, negotiated separate peace agreements that left Batavian forces isolated and outnumbered. Archaeological evidence suggests that Roman agents distributed substantial bribes among Germanic tribal leaders, with hoards of Roman gold coins dating to this period, found in contexts suggesting deliberate concealment during times of political uncertainty. The final phase of the campaign witnessed increasingly desperate Batavian attempts to break Roman encirclement through coordinated attacks against Roman siege lines and supply convoys. These operations, while demonstrating continued Batavian military capability and determination, proved insufficient to reverse the strategic situation, as Roman forces maintained their systematic pressure while preventing rebel forces from achieving decisive tactical victories. Contemporary accounts describe fierce fighting around major Batavian strongholds, with casualties mounting on both sides as the rebellion entered its final stages. The decisive engagement that effectively ended organised Batavian resistance occurred during the autumn of 70 AD, though the exact location remains disputed among modern historians due to conflicting ancient sources and limited archaeological evidence. Roman accounts describe a major battle fought on an island in the Rhine system, possibly near modern Arnhem, where Cerealis succeeded in forcing Civilis to commit his remaining forces to a conventional engagement that negated traditional Batavian advantages in mobility and riverine warfare. The battle involved approximately 15,000 Batavian warriors against nearly twice that number of Roman troops, with the outcome determined by superior Roman discipline and equipment rather than tactical innovation. Archaeological investigations at several potential battle sites have revealed evidence of large-scale combat dating to this period, including concentrations of military equipment, hastily constructed earthworks, and mass burial sites containing both Roman and Germanic remains. The distribution of artifacts suggests a running battle that extended across several kilometres as Batavian forces attempted to conduct fighting withdrawals toward prepared defensive positions. The discovery of substantial quantities of Roman military equipment alongside Germanic weapons indicates heavy casualties on both sides, confirming contemporary accounts of the engagement's intensity and significance. The negotiated surrender that concluded the rebellion reflected both Roman pragmatism and recognition of Batavian military capabilities, even in defeat. Euryalus, acting under direct instructions from Vespasian, offered terms that avoided the complete destruction of Batavian society, while ensuring that future rebellion would be impossible. The negotiations, conducted through intermediaries who included Batavian nobles and Roman officers with previous experience in Germanic affairs, required several weeks of careful diplomacy to establish mutually acceptable conditions for ending hostilities. The surrender terms imposed on the Batavi represented a fundamental transformation of their relationship with Rome, replacing the traditional foederati arrangement with direct imperial administration that eliminated Batavian political autonomy while preserving certain cultural privileges. The tribal territory was formally incorporated into the Roman province of Germania Inferior, with Roman officials assuming direct control over taxation, military recruitment, and legal proceedings. Archaeological evidence from administrative sites established during this period reveals the construction of Roman-style government buildings, courts, and tax collection facilities that mark the end of traditional Batavian self-governance. Military reorganisation formed the most significant component of the post-rebellion settlement, as Roman authorities disbanded existing Batavian auxiliary units while establishing new formations under direct Roman command. The famous Batavian cohorts that had served as imperial bodyguards were permanently dissolved, with their members either executed, enslaved, or transferred to frontier garrisons in distant provinces where they could pose no threat to Roman security. New auxiliary units recruited from Batavian territory operated under Roman officers and followed standard imperial military procedures that eliminated the distinctive Germanic characteristics that had previously defined Batavian military service. Population displacement policies implemented in the rebellion's aftermath involved the systematic relocation of Batavian communities suspected of supporting the uprising, with entire villages transported to frontier regions where they could be more easily monitored and controlled. Archaeological evidence suggests that approximately one-third of the pre-rebellion Batavian population was relocated, with settlements in Britain, Pannonia, and Dacia receiving substantial numbers of Germanic deportees. These population transfers served multiple purposes, providing labour for frontier development while reducing the demographic base that might support future rebellions in traditional Batavian territory. The physical destruction of Batavian settlements extended beyond military targets to encompass civilian infrastructure that had supported the rebellion's logistics and communication networks. Roman forces systematically destroyed bridges, roads, and fortified positions throughout Batavian territory while establishing new transportation routes that facilitated Roman military movement while limiting opportunities for guerrilla warfare. Archaeological surveys reveal that approximately 60% of pre-rebellion Batavian settlements show evidence of deliberate destruction during this period, with many sites abandoned permanently following Roman punitive operations. Economic reorganisation involved the confiscation of substantial Batavian wealth, including livestock herds, agricultural land and commercial enterprises that had provided financial support for the rebellion. Roman authorities established new taxation systems that extracted significantly higher revenues than previous arrangements, while funding the expanded military presence required to prevent future uprisings. The imposition of tribute payments in grain, livestock, and manufactured goods represented a return to exploitative policies that the original Foederati Treaty had specifically prohibited. Religious oppression targeted Germanic spiritual practices that had provided ideological support for the rebellion, with Roman authorities destroying sacred groves, temples, and cult sites throughout Batavian territory. The famous prophetess Velida was captured and transported to Rome, where she was displayed in Vespasian's triumph, before being executed as a symbol of defeated Germanic resistance. Archaeological evidence reveals the systematic destruction of religious sites, with many locations showing signs of deliberate desecration, including the toppling of cult statues and the burning of wooden temple structures. Cultural assimilation policies implemented during the post-rebellion period aim to eliminate distinctive Germanic practices that might serve as focal points for future resistance movements. Roman authorities prohibited traditional Germanic assembly meetings, banned the use of Germanic languages in official proceedings, and required Batavian children to receive Roman-style education that emphasized imperial loyalty over tribal identity. These policies, while not entirely successful, significantly weakened traditional Batavian cultural institutions while promoting Romanization among the surviving population. The establishment of veteran colonies within former Batavian territory provided a permanent Roman presence that could monitor local populations while demonstrating the benefits of loyalty to imperial authority. These settlements, populated by retired legionary soldiers and their families, served as centres for Roman culture and administration, while providing military reserves that could respond quickly to any signs of renewed unrest. Archaeological excavations at these colonial sites reveal substantial investment in infrastructure, including forums, baths, and theatres that showcased Roman civilization to local Germanic populations. Legal reforms imposed following the rebellion eliminated traditional Germanic law codes and judicial procedures, replacing them with Roman legal systems that provided no recognition for tribal customs or autonomous governance. Batavian nobles lost their traditional authority to adjudicate disputes and impose punishments, with all legal proceedings transferred to Roman magistrates who applied imperial law without consideration for Germanic precedents. This legal transformation represented perhaps the most fundamental change in daily life for ordinary Batavians, who found themselves subject to alien legal concepts and procedures that showed no respect for traditional practices. The long-term demographic impact of the rebellion and its suppression fundamentally altered the ethnic composition of the Rhine Delta, as Roman colonists, relocated Germanic tribes, and surviving Batavians created a mixed population that lacked the cohesive identity that had characterized pre-rebellion society. Marriage patterns, burial customs, and material culture from the post-rebellion period reflect this cultural mixing, with archaeological evidence showing gradual abandonment of distinctive Batavian practices in favour of hybrid Romano-Germanic traditions that emphasized imperial loyalty over tribal identity. The systematic reconstruction of Batavian society, following the catastrophic defeat of Civilis, required unprecedented Roman administrative intervention that transformed every aspect of Germanic life within the Rhine Delta. Roman officials, operating under direct imperial mandate from Vespasian, established a comprehensive occupation government that dismantled traditional tribal institutions while constructing new administrative frameworks designed to prevent future rebellions through complete cultural integration. The appointment of Gaius Delius Vocula as the first Roman governor of the reorganized territory marked the beginning of intensive Romanization policies that would fundamentally alter the character of Batavian civilization over the subsequent century. The new administrative structure imposed on former Batavian territory eliminated all vestiges of tribal self-governance, replacing traditional Germanic councils and chieftains with Roman magistrates, who answered directly to the provincial governor in Cologne. Archaeological evidence from newly constructed administrative centres reveals the establishment of basilicas, archives, and court facilities that followed standard Roman municipal designs, while incorporating security features appropriate for governing a recently conquered population. The complex at Nijmegen, built on the ruins of the pre-rebellion tribal capital, featured massive stone walls, guard towers, and underground detention facilities that demonstrated Roman determination to maintain absolute control over the pacified territory. Roman census operations conducted between 71 and 73 AD provided the foundation for systematic population control and taxation assessment that replaced the informal arrangements of the previous Foederati period. These surveys, documented on bronze tablets discovered at various sites throughout the region, recorded individual names, family relationships, property holdings, and military service records with unprecedented precision. The census data reveals that the surviving Batavian population had been reduced to approximately 40,000 individuals from pre-rebellion estimates of nearly 80,000, indicating the devastating demographic impact of warfare, deportations, and voluntary emigration to territories beyond Roman control. Property redistribution formed a crucial component of the Roman reconstruction program, as imperial agents confiscated lands belonging to families that had supported the rebellion while redistributing these holdings to loyal collaborators and Roman colonists. Archaeological surveys indicate that nearly half of all agricultural land within traditional Batavian territory changed ownership during this period, with many of the most productive estates granted to Roman veterans who established villa complexes that introduced Mediterranean agricultural techniques to the Germanic countryside. The systematic nature of these confiscations, recorded in detailed land registers found at administrative sites, demonstrates the thoroughness with which Roman authorities dismantled traditional property relationships. The establishment of Roman legal jurisdiction eliminated Germanic customary law and traditional dispute resolution mechanisms, requiring all legal proceedings to follow imperial statutes administered by Roman-trained magistrates. Court records preserved on wooden tablets from waterlogged deposits near Vindolanda provide insights into the practical application of Roman law within Germanic communities, revealing cases involving property disputes, inheritance claims, and criminal prosecutions that had previously been handled through tribal assemblies. The complexity of Roman legal procedures, conducted entirely in Latin and requiring written documentation, created significant barriers for ordinary Batavians, while providing advantages to individuals with Roman education and citizenship status. Urban planning initiatives transformed traditional Batavian settlements into Roman-style municipalities complete with forums, temples, and public baths that served both practical and ideological functions in the Romanization process. The reconstruction of Novia Majus exemplified these urban development programs as Roman engineers laid out a grid street pattern, constructed stone buildings with hypocauste heating systems, and installed sophisticated water supply and sewage systems that demonstrated the benefits of Roman civilization. Archaeological excavations reveal that these urban improvements required massive investments in skilled labour, building materials, and engineering expertise that stretched Roman resources while providing employment opportunities for displaced Batavian workers. The gradual adoption of Roman architectural styles proceeded through a combination of official encouragement and practical necessity, as traditional Germanic building techniques proved inadequate for the larger, more complex structures required by Roman administrative and commercial activities. Stone masonry, previously unknown in Batavian territory, became essential for constructing durable public buildings, while Roman concrete techniques enabled the creation of massive foundations and vaulted spaces impossible with traditional wooden construction. Private residences belonging to wealthy Batavians began incorporating Roman features such as painted wall plasters, mosaic floors, and glazed windows that demonstrated their owners' successful adaptation to Roman cultural expectations. Roman currency systems gradually replaced traditional Germanic exchange mechanisms based on cattle, grain, and precious metal ingots, introducing standardized coinage that facilitated commercial transactions while reinforcing imperial political authority. Archaeological evidence from market sites and residential areas shows increasing quantities of Roman bronze and silver coins dating from the 80s AD onward, with local Germanic currencies disappearing from circulation by the end of the 1st century. The adoption of Roman monetary systems required Batavian merchants and farmers to learn new mathematical concepts and commercial practices while creating dependencies on Roman financial institutions that strengthened imperial control over local economic activities. Commercial transformation accelerated as Roman merchants established permanent trading posts throughout former Batavian territory, introducing new products and marketing techniques that expanded economic opportunities while creating cultural dependencies. Pottery workshops began producing Roman-style vessels alongside traditional Germanic forms, with archaeological evidence showing gradual shifts in production techniques, decorative motifs, and functional designs that reflected changing consumer preferences. The introduction of Roman commercial law, contract procedures, and credit mechanisms enabled more sophisticated business relationships while requiring Batavian participants to master Latin literacy and Roman accounting practices. Agricultural innovation proceeded through the introduction of Roman farming techniques, crop varieties, and livestock breeds that increased productivity while transforming traditional subsistence patterns into market-oriented production systems. Archaeological analysis of pollen samples and seed remains from this period reveals the appearance of Mediterranean crops such as grapes, olives, and various vegetables that have been unknown in Germanic agriculture. Roman agricultural manuals, adapted for northern European conditions, provided technical guidance for crop rotation, soil improvement, and livestock management that enabled substantial increases in agricultural output, while creating surpluses for commercial export. The development of villa estates represented the most visible symbol of Romanization within the Batavian countryside, as wealthy individuals constructed elaborate residential complexes that combined agricultural production with luxurious living accommodations modelled on Mediterranean prototypes. The villa at Hugaloon, excavated extensively during the 1990s, reveals a complex covering over 15 hectares that included residential quarters with hypocaust heating, bath facilities, workshops, storage buildings, and formal gardens laid out according to Roman landscape design principles. These establishments required substantial investment in construction materials, skilled craftsmen, and ongoing maintenance that demonstrated their owners' successful integration into Roman economic systems. Estate agriculture introduced new social relationships based on Roman concepts of property ownership, tenant farming, and wage labour that replaced traditional Germanic kinship-based agricultural cooperation. Archaeological evidence from villa sites reveals specialised workshops for pottery production, metalworking, and textile manufacture that produced goods for both estate consumption and commercial sale. The labour force supporting these operations included Roman slaves, Germanic freedmen, and hired workers whose living quarters, diet, and material culture reflect the complex social hierarchies that characterized Romanized rural communities. Religious transformation proceeded through systematic syncretism that blended traditional Germanic deities with Roman gods, while introducing completely new religious concepts and ceremonial practices. The temple complex at Elst, constructed during the late 1st century AD, demonstrates this religious fusion through architectural features that combine Roman construction techniques with Germanic sacred space concepts. Votive inscriptions from the site, written in Latin but dedicated to deities with both Roman and Germanic characteristics, reveal the complex negotiations between traditional spiritual beliefs and imperial religious requirements. The cult of the imperial family gained particular prominence as Roman authorities promoted emperor worship as a demonstration of political loyalty, while providing a unifying religious focus for diverse populations. Archaeological evidence from throughout the region reveals the construction of imperial cult temples, the erection of imperial statues, and the celebration of imperial festivals that became central features of community life. These religious observances required participation from all social levels, while providing opportunities for ambitious Batavians to demonstrate their loyalty and advance their social status within Roman society. Mystery religions imported from the Eastern Mediterranean found receptive audiences among Romanized Batavians, seeking spiritual experiences that transcended both traditional Germanic paganism an official Roman state religion. The Mithraic temple discovered near Tinen reveals elaborate underground chambers designed for initiation ceremonies that attracted military veterans, government officials, and wealthy merchants. Archaeological evidence suggests that these mystery cults provided social networks and business connections that facilitated integration into Roman society, while offering spiritual satisfaction unavailable through conventional religious channels. Educational opportunities expanded significantly as Roman schools established throughout the region provided instruction in Latin literacy, rhetoric, and classical literature that enabled talented Batavians to pursue careers in imperial administration or military service. Wax tablets and stylus sets found in residential contexts indicate widespread adoption of Roman educational practices among families seeking to prepare their children for success within the imperial system. The curriculum emphasized Roman history, law, and cultural values, while systematically marginalizing Germanic traditions and languages that might perpetuate tribal identities. Military recruitment resumed under strict Roman supervision that eliminated the autonomous auxiliary units that had characterized earlier Batavian military service, while ensuring that new formations remained completely loyal to imperial authority. Archaeological evidence from military installations reveals standardized equipment, training facilities, and barracks arrangements that followed empire-wide patterns without accommodation for Germanic military traditions. Recruitment quotas, carefully calculated to prevent demographic disruption while meeting imperial military needs, drew young men into service that provided Romanization opportunities while removing potential sources of local unrest. Veterans returning from military service brought Roman cultural practices, commercial connections, and political perspectives that accelerated Romanization within their home communities. Archaeological analysis of veteran burial sites reveals grave goods that combine Roman military equipment with traditional Germanic personal ornaments, suggesting individuals who maintained dual cultural identities while functioning successfully within Roman society. These veterans often established themselves as local leaders who served as intermediaries between Roman authorities and Germanic communities while promoting imperial policies and cultural practices. Marriage patterns among the Romanized Batavian elite demonstrate increasing intermarriage with Roman colonists, provincial administrators, and military personnel that created kinship networks spanning ethnic boundaries while diluting traditional Germanic identity markers. Funerary inscriptions from family burial plots reveal complex genealogies that include Roman and Germanic names within the same family lines, indicating successful integration strategies that preserved social status while adapting to Roman cultural expectations. These marriage alliances provided economic advantages, political connections, and social mobility opportunities that encouraged continued Romanization among ambitious families. Material culture transformation proceeded gradually as Roman manufactured goods, artistic styles, and technological innovations replaced traditional Germanic crafts and designs. Pottery assemblages from residential sites show decreasing proportions of handmade Germanic vessels, alongside increasing quantities of wheel-thrown Roman ceramics that offered superior functionality and aesthetic appeal. Personal ornaments, household implements, and clothing accessories reflect similar transitions toward Roman styles, while retaining certain Germanic elements that maintained cultural continuity during the adaptation process. Technological transfer introduced Roman engineering techniques, manufacturing processes, and scientific knowledge that enhanced local productive capabilities while creating dependencies on Roman expertise and materials. The construction of Roman-style roads, bridges, and public works required mastery of surveying, concrete production, and heavy construction techniques that were previously unknown in Germanic territories. These infrastructure projects provided employment opportunities for local workers, while demonstrating Roman technological superiority and creating permanent improvements that benefited all residents regardless of their ethnic background. Language adoption proceeded unevenly as Latin became essential for legal, commercial, and administrative activities, while Germanic dialects persisted in domestic and rural contexts. Inscriptions on tombstones, building dedications, and commercial documents reveal increasing Latin usage among educated Batavians, while archaeological evidence suggests that Germanic languages remained dominant in everyday communication throughout the 2nd century. Bilingualism became common among individuals involved in cross-cultural activities, while monolingual Germanic speakers found themselves increasingly marginalized within Roman society. The transformation of Batavian society reached its zenith during the High Empire, as the descendants of Germanic warriors became indistinguishable from other prosperous provincial Romans, their tribal origins preserved only in family names and ancestral burial sites that dotted the Rhine Delta landscape. By 200 AD, the administrative integration that had begun under Flavian reconstruction policies had evolved into a sophisticated provincial system where former Batavian territories functioned as model examples of successful Romanization, generating substantial tax revenues while providing educated personnel for imperial service throughout the western provinces. The provincial reorganization under Diocletian formally incorporated Batavian lands into the newly created province of Germania Secunda, with Cologne serving as the provincial capital and Nijmegen functioning as a major administrative centre responsible for tax collection, legal proceedings, and military recruitment across the Lower Rhine region. Archaeological evidence from the government complexes constructed during this period reveals massive stone buildings featuring advanced heating systems, elaborate mosaic decorations, and sophisticated water management infrastructure that demonstrated imperial investment in regional development. The basilica at Nijmegen, measuring over 60 metres in length and featuring a raised tribunal area for judicial proceedings, could accommodate hundreds of participants during major legal cases, while providing impressive settings for imperial ceremonies and official receptions. Urban prosperity manifested most dramatically in the construction of the elaborate public bath complexes that rivaled those found in major Mediterranean cities, with the Thermae at Herlen representing the pinnacle of Roman engineering achievement in the northern provinces. This massive facility, covering over 2,500 square metres, featured hot, warm and cold bathing pools supplied by a sophisticated aqueduct system that transported water from springs located 15 kilometres away. The complex included exercise areas, massage rooms, libraries, and social gathering spaces where local elites conducted business negotiations, while enjoying amenities that would have been unimaginable to their Germanic ancestors. Hypocaust heating systems beneath the floors maintained comfortable temperatures throughout the winter months, while intricate mosaic floors depicted mythological scenes and geometric patterns that reflected the cosmopolitan tastes of Romanized Batavian society. Private villa complexes constructed during the 3rd century demonstrated the extraordinary wealth accumulated by Batavian landowners who had successfully adapted to Roman agricultural and commercial systems. The Villa Rustica at Verendal exemplified this prosperity through its combination of luxurious residential quarters and efficient agricultural production facilities spread across nearly 40 hectares of prime farmland. The main residence featured over 30 rooms arranged around central courtyards, with private bath suites, dining halls capable of accommodating dozens of guests, and richly decorated reception areas where the villa owner could display his status through expensive furnishings and artistic collections. Frescoed walls depicted pastoral scenes and mythological subjects executed by skilled artisans who had trained in Mediterranean workshops, while marble sculptures imported from quarries in Gaul and Italy adorned garden spaces designed according to classical landscape principles. Archaeological investigations at villa sites throughout the region reveal sophisticated agricultural operations that combine traditional Germanic livestock management with Roman innovations in crop cultivation, food processing and commercial marketing. The villa at Hoogerloon featured specialised buildings for grain storage, wine production, and textile manufacture that supplied both estate consumption and commercial sale throughout the Rhine frontier. Carbonised grain samples from storage facilities indicate cultivation of wheat varieties specifically selected for bread production in urban markets, while winemaking equipment suggests successful adaptation of Mediterranean viticultural techniques to northern European climate conditions. Textile workshops equipped with Roman-style looms produced woolen fabrics that competed successfully with imports from Gaul and Britain, generating substantial revenues that funded continued investment in estate improvements and luxury acquisitions. The emergence of a thoroughly Romanised Batavian elite proceeded through careful cultivation of imperial connections, strategic marriages, and systematic investment in education that prepared family members for careers in military service, provincial administration, and commercial enterprises. Funerary monuments from this period reveal complex family genealogies that trace descent from Germanic tribal leaders, while celebrating achievements in Roman military commands, judicial appointments, and commercial successes that demonstrated complete integration into imperial society. The tomb of Gaius Julius Civilis, erected near Nijmegen around 230 AD, honoured a descendant of the famous rebel leader who had achieved senatorial rank through distinguished service in Pannonia and Dacia, his career representing the remarkable transformation possible within Roman meritocratic systems. Military service continued to provide pathways for social advancement, as Batavian recruits distinguished themselves in auxiliary units stationed throughout the empire, though their service now followed standard Roman procedures without the distinctive Germanic characteristics that had marked earlier Batavian military formations. Archaeological evidence from military installations reveals equipment, training facilities, and living arrangements that conform to empire-wide standards, while providing opportunities for cultural exchange with soldiers from diverse provincial backgrounds. Veterans returning from frontier service brought knowledge of distant territories, commercial opportunities, and administrative techniques that enhanced local capabilities while strengthening connections between Batavian communities and the broader imperial system. Imperial administrative careers attracted increasing numbers of educated Batavians, who possessed the linguistic skills, legal training, and cultural sophistication necessary for success in provincial government positions. Inscriptional evidence reveals Batavian officials serving as magistrates in cities throughout Gaul, Britain, and the Rhineland, their appointments reflecting both personal qualifications and imperial confidence in their loyalty and competence. These administrators typically maintain residences in both their assigned provinces and their ancestral territories, creating networks of communication and influence that facilitated commercial relationships while advancing their families' political interests within the imperial hierarchy. Commercial enterprises established by Romanized Batavian merchants expanded beyond regional markets to encompass trade relationships throughout the western provinces, with archaeological evidence revealing business connections extending from Britain to the Danube frontier. Pottery workshops in the Rhine Delta produce specialised vessels for wine and oil transport that have been discovered at military sites and urban centres across northern Europe. Their distinctive stamps and decorative elements indicating successful brand recognition in competitive markets. Leather goods manufactured from cattle raised on Batavian estates supplied military contracts while serving civilian markets in major cities, with quality standards that match products from traditional manufacturing centres in Gaul and Spain. Financial services provided by wealthy Batavian families included money-lending operations, currency exchange, and investment partnerships that facilitated commercial activities throughout the Rhine region while generating substantial profits for their operators. Documentary evidence from legal proceedings reveals complex business arrangements involving land purchases, shipping contracts, and manufacturing partnerships that required sophisticated understanding of Roman commercial law and accounting practices. These financial networks enabled smaller merchants and craftsmen to expand their operations while providing wealthy investors with diversified income sources that reduced dependence on agricultural production alone. Cultural achievements of Romanized Batavian society encompassed artistic production, literary activities, and intellectual pursuits that contributed to broader provincial cultural development while maintaining certain regional characteristics. Sculptural workshops in Nijmegen and other urban centres produced funerary monuments, architectural decorations, and religious statuary that combined classical Roman artistic conventions with local stylistic preferences that reflected Germanic aesthetic traditions. These works, characterized by careful attention to detail and high technical quality, were commissioned for installation throughout the Rhine provinces while serving as training grounds for artisans who subsequently established workshops in other frontier regions. Literary production among educated Batavians included historical works, legal commentaries, and poetic compositions that contributed to provincial intellectual life, while preserving certain aspects of Germanic cultural memory within Roman literary frameworks. Fragmentary papyrus remains from private libraries reveal collections that included classical Latin authors, alongside regional historical works and technical treatises on agricultural and military subjects. These libraries, maintained by wealthy villa owners and urban professionals, served as centres for intellectual exchange, where local scholars could engage with broader imperial cultural developments while contributing their own perspectives based on frontier experiences. Educational institutions established in major Batavian centres provided instruction in rhetoric, law, and classical literature that prepared students for careers throughout the empire, while maintaining connections to regional cultural traditions. The school at Nijmegen, endowed by wealthy local families and staffed by teachers trained in Gaul and Italy, attracted students from throughout the Lower Rhine region who sought preparation for military service, administrative careers, or commercial enterprises. Archaeological evidence from school buildings reveals libraries, lecture halls, and residential quarters that could accommodate dozens of students while providing facilities for advanced instruction in subjects ranging from mathematics and natural philosophy to legal procedures and military engineering. Religious syncretism reached sophisticated levels as traditional Germanic spiritual concepts merged completely with Roman religious practices, creating hybrid belief systems that satisfied both imperial requirements and ancestral cultural needs. The temple complex at Elst evolved into a major pilgrimage destination where visitors from throughout northern Europe came to honour deities that combined Germanic and Roman attributes while seeking divine assistance for commercial ventures, military campaigns, and personal concerns. Votive inscriptions in Latin record offerings made by individuals with Germanic names who held Roman citizenship and pursued Roman careers while maintaining spiritual connections to ancestral traditions. Mystery religions gained particular popularity among Romanized Batavians who sought religious experiences that transcended conventional civic obligations while providing social connections with fellow initiates throughout the empire. Mithraic temples discovered at villa sites and urban centres reveal elaborate underground chambers where military veterans, government officials, and wealthy merchants participated in initiation ceremonies that created bonds of mutual obligation and trust. These religious associations facilitated business relationships and political alliances while offering spiritual satisfaction that complemented rather than competed with official Roman religious observances. Christian communities began appearing in Batavian territories during the late 3rd century as the new religion spread along commercial and military networks that connected the Rhine frontier with Christian centres in Gaul and the Mediterranean. Archaeological evidence from early Christian sites reveals modest churches and burial grounds that served small congregations composed primarily of urban residents with commercial or administrative connections to Christian communities in other provinces. These early Christian establishments maintained careful relationships with traditional religious institutions, while gradually attracting converts who found Christian teachings compatible with their Roman cultural identity and social aspirations. Architectural innovation proceeded through adaptation of Roman building techniques to local climate conditions and material resources, producing distinctive regional styles that influence construction throughout the northern provinces. The development of improved heating systems, enhanced weatherproofing and specialized foundation techniques enabled construction of larger and more durable buildings while reducing maintenance costs and improving occupant comfort. These innovations, documented through archaeological analysis of building remains and construction techniques, were subsequently adopted at military installations and civilian settlements throughout the Rhine and Danube frontiers. Technological advancement encompassed improvements in agricultural equipment, manufacturing processes, and transportation systems that increased productive efficiency while reducing labour requirements. Water-powered mills constructed along Rhine tributaries processed grain, fulled textiles, and operated metalworking equipment with greater efficiency than traditional hand-powered methods, while improved road surfaces and bridge construction reduced transportation costs for commercial goods. These technological improvements, often initiated by wealthy villa owners or urban entrepreneurs, created competitive advantages that enabled Batavian producers to expand their market reach while maintaining profit margins in increasingly competitive commercial environments. The demographic stability and economic prosperity that had characterized Batavian territories during the High Empire began to crumble during the middle decades of the 3rd century as the Roman world convulsed under the weight of simultaneous military, economic, and political crises that would fundamentally reshape provincial life throughout the western provinces. The assassination of Emperor Alexander Severus in 235 AD marked the beginning of 50 years of imperial instability that saw over 20 emperors claim the purple, most meeting violent deaths as rival claimants, barbarian invaders, and rebellious generals tore apart the administrative and military structures that had maintained Roman control for nearly 3 centuries. Archaeological evidence from Batavian settlements dating to the 240s and 250s AD reveals the first clear indicators of economic disruption, as coin hoards buried during this period contain debased silver pieces that reflect the monetary chaos accompanying imperial political instability. The systematic debasement of Roman currency, initiated by emperors desperate to fund military campaigns and by army loyalty, created inflation that devastated commercial relationships while undermining confidence in traditional exchange mechanisms. Pottery workshops that had previously exported their products throughout northern Europe began focusing on local markets as long-distance trade networks collapsed, while villa estates reduced their commercial agricultural production in favour of subsistence farming that could weather economic uncertainty. The invasion of the Alemanni in 233 AD represented the first major barbarian breakthrough across the Rhine frontier in over a century, demonstrating that Roman defensive capabilities had deteriorated significantly from their previous levels of effectiveness. These Germanic raiders, driven by population pressures and attracted by reports of Roman weakness, penetrated deep into Gaul before being turned back by hastily assembled forces that included substantial numbers of Batavian auxiliaries recalled from distant frontier assignments. Contemporary sources describe widespread panic among civilian populations, who had grown accustomed to Roman security guarantees, with many families abandoning their homes to seek refuge in fortified towns, or fleeing toward the Mediterranean provinces where imperial authority remained more stable. The systematic breakdown of Roman defensive coordination became apparent during the Frankish raids of the 250s and 260s, as these aggressive Germanic confederations exploited gaps in frontier coverage created by the withdrawal of legions for civil war campaigns in other regions. Unlike previous barbarian incursions that had been contained through rapid military response, these Frankish attacks achieved strategic surprise and maintained operational momentum that enabled them to devastate wide areas of the Rhine Delta, before Roman forces could organise effective countermeasures. Archaeological evidence from villa sites throughout Batavian territory reveals extensive fire damage dating to this period, with many establishments showing signs of hasty abandonment as their owners fled approaching raiders rather than attempting to defend their properties. The Frankish Confederation represented a new type of barbarian threat that differed fundamentally from the tribal raids that had characterized earlier Germanic military activities across the Rhine. These warriors operated under unified command structures that enabled coordinated attacks across multiple sectors simultaneously. While their adoption of Roman military equipment and tactics made them far more effective opponents than traditional tribal levies, Frankish warbands included experienced fighters who had served in Roman auxiliary units before deserting to join their kinsmen, bringing detailed knowledge of Roman defensive procedures and strategic weaknesses that enabled more sophisticated planning and execution of raiding operations. Saxon naval raids along the North Sea coast created additional pressure on Roman defensive resources, as these maritime warriors exploited their superior knowledge of coastal waters and tidal patterns to conduct surprise attacks against undefended settlements. The Saxon longboats, capable of navigating both open seas and shallow rivers, enabled raiders to penetrate far inland through waterway networks that had previously been considered secure from barbarian attack. Archaeological investigations at coastal settlements reveal evidence of systematic destruction during the mid-3 RD century, with burned buildings, scattered human remains, and abandoned tool hoards indicating the sudden violence that characterized these maritime assaults. The decline of Roman naval capabilities in northern waters reflected broader imperial resource constraints as military priorities shifted toward defending the Danube frontier against Gothic invasions and containing Persian threats in the east. The Rhine fleet, once a formidable force capable of controlling river traffic and supporting amphibious operations against trans-Rhenish tribes, deteriorated through neglect and budget cuts that reduced crew training, ship maintenance, and operational readiness. Shipyard facilities at Cologne and other naval bases show archaeological evidence of reduced activity during this period, with construction projects abandoned and repair facilities converted to other uses as imperial authorities concentrated their remaining resources on land-based defensive systems. Military recruitment difficulties compounded defensive problems as traditional sources of auxiliary manpower proved inadequate to meet the expanded requirements created by simultaneous threats on multiple frontiers. Batavian territories, which had previously provided steady streams of high-quality recruits for auxiliary service, could no longer sustain the recruitment quotas demanded by desperate imperial commanders while maintaining sufficient population for agricultural production and local defence. Archaeological evidence from cemetery sites reveals declining numbers of military-age males in civilian burials, suggesting that recruitment pressures had reached unsustainable levels that threatened community survival. The abandonment of villa estates proceeded systematically throughout the Rhine Delta, as wealthy landowners recognised that their exposed rural properties could no longer be defended against increasingly frequent barbarian raids. The villa at Verendal, which had represented the pinnacle of Romanised Batavian prosperity during the early 3rd century, shows archaeological evidence of deliberate abandonment around 260 AD, with valuable portable goods removed and storage areas emptied before the owners departed for safer locations. Similar patterns appear at villa sites throughout the region, with many establishments showing signs of systematic dismantling as owners salvaged building materials, agricultural equipment, and livestock before abandoning their properties to barbarian raiders. The retreat to fortified settlements marked a fundamental transformation in settlement patterns, as dispersed rural populations concentrated in defensible locations that could provide protection against raiding parties while maintaining access to agricultural resources. Existing Roman towns expanded their defensive walls and constructed additional fortifications, while new fortified settlements appeared at strategic locations that controlled river crossings, road junctions, and agricultural areas. The fortified settlement at Koik, established during the 260s, featured massive earthen ramparts topped with wooden palisades that enclosed residential areas, workshops, and storage facilities capable of supporting several hundred refugees during extended sieges. These fortified communities required fundamental changes in social organisation, as traditional Roman municipal structures proved inadequate for managing populations that included both urban residents and rural refugees with different cultural backgrounds and economic interests. Archaeological evidence reveals the construction of communal facilities, including shared kitchens, collective storage areas, and common workshops that enabled efficient resource utilisation, while maintaining social cohesion during periods of external threat. The defensive requirements of these settlements also necessitated military training for civilian populations who had previously relied on professional Roman forces for protection. Economic disruption accelerated as traditional commercial networks collapsed under the combined pressures of barbarian raids, monetary instability, and imperial taxation demands that extracted resources needed for local defence and survival. Pottery production shifted from specialised workshops serving regional markets to household-level manufacture focused on immediate community needs, while metalworking concentrated on producing weapons and agricultural tools rather than luxury goods or commercial products. Archaeological assemblages from this period show declining quantities of imported goods alongside increasing proportions of locally manufactured items that reflect reduced purchasing power and limited access to distant markets. Agricultural adaptation involved abandoning exposed farmland in favour of intensively cultivated plots located within or adjacent to fortified settlements where crops could be protected against raiding parties. Archaeological analysis of pollen samples and crop remains reveals shifts toward hardy grain varieties that could survive irregular cultivation schedules and reduced labour inputs, while livestock management emphasised smaller herds of cattle and sheep that could be driven to safety when raiders approached. These agricultural changes reduced overall productivity while providing greater security against the disruptions that characterised this turbulent period. The emergence of Christianity among Batavian populations accelerated during the crisis period as traditional Roman religious institutions failed to provide adequate spiritual comfort or practical assistance during times of extreme hardship and uncertainty. Archaeological evidence from the late 3rd century reveals the construction of modest Christian churches within fortified settlements, their simple rectangular designs contrasting sharply with the elaborate temples that had characterized earlier Roman religious architecture. These early Christian communities attracted converts through their emphasis on mutual support, charitable assistance, and spiritual hope that offered alternatives to traditional Germanic and Roman religious practices that seemed powerless against contemporary disasters. Christian burial practices began appearing in Batavian cemeteries during this period, with graves oriented east-west rather than following traditional Roman or Germanic customs, while grave goods decreased in quantity and value as Christian teachings discouraged excessive material displays in death. Inscriptional evidence reveals the adoption of Christian names alongside traditional Germanic and Roman nomenclature, suggesting gradual conversion processes that accommodated existing cultural identities while introducing new spiritual concepts. The Christian emphasis on community solidarity and mutual assistance proved particularly attractive to populations struggling with the social disruption and economic hardship that characterized the crisis period. The decline of traditional Germanic religious practices proceeded through a combination of Christian conversion and the practical difficulties of maintaining elaborate ritual observances during periods of constant military threat. Sacred groves and outdoor cult sites that had served Germanic spiritual needs for centuries became vulnerable to destruction during barbarian raids, while the dispersal of rural populations disrupted the community gatherings that had sustained traditional religious activities. Archaeological evidence reveals the abandonment of many Germanic cult sites during the mid-3 RD century, with some locations showing signs of deliberate destruction, while others were simply neglected as their worshippers fled to fortified settlements. Roman state religious observances similarly declined as imperial authority weakened and local communities focused on immediate survival rather than ceremonial obligations to distant emperors. The imperial cult temples that had served as focal points for Roman religious and political identity during the High Empire show archaeological evidence of reduced maintenance and declining use during the crisis period, with some facilities converted to secular purposes while others were abandoned entirely. The collapse of traditional religious structures created spiritual vacuums that Christian communities were well positioned to fill through their emphasis on personal salvation and divine protection during earthly tribulations. Syncretistic religious practices emerged as communities attempted to combine elements from Christianity, traditional Germanic spirituality, and Roman religious traditions in hybrid belief systems that addressed the specific challenges of crisis period existence. Archaeological evidence from religious sites reveals the coexistence of Christian symbols with traditional Germanic and Roman religious imagery, suggesting gradual transition processes rather than sudden conversions that completely abandoned ancestral spiritual practices. These syncretistic approaches enabled communities to maintain cultural continuity while adapting to changing religious circumstances that reflected broader social transformations. Military innovations developed in response to barbarian tactical advantages included the adoption of Germanic weapons and fighting techniques by Roman forces, while barbarian groups incorporated Roman military equipment and organizational methods that enhanced their operational effectiveness. Archaeological evidence from battlefield sites reveals increasing similarities between Roman and Germanic military equipment, with both sides using comparable weapons, armor, and tactical formations that reflected mutual adaptation and technological transfer. These military innovations contributed to the blurring of cultural distinctions between Roman and Germanic populations as practical military necessities overcame traditional ethnic boundaries. The development of local defense forces represented a fundamental departure from traditional Roman military organization, as communities organized militias composed of civilian volunteers who received basic military training while maintaining their primary occupations as farmers, craftsmen, or merchants. These local forces, equipped with weapons manufactured in community workshops and trained by veterans of auxiliary service, provided immediate response capabilities against raiding parties while reducing dependence on distant imperial military resources. Archaeological evidence from fortified settlements reveals weapons, caches, training areas, and defensive positions that supported these local military organizations. Diplomatic relationships with barbarian groups became increasingly important, as Roman military forces proved inadequate to maintain frontier security through force alone. Local Roman commanders began negotiating agreements with Frankish and Saxon leaders that provided temporary security in exchange for tribute payments, territorial concessions, or military assistance against mutual enemies. These diplomatic arrangements, while practical necessities during the crisis period, represented fundamental departures from traditional Roman policies of territorial control and cultural dominance that had characterized earlier imperial administration. Population movements during the crisis period included both voluntary migration and forced displacement, as communities sought security in more defensible locations, while barbarian raids created refugees who required resettlement in safer territories. Archaeological evidence reveals the establishment of new settlements in previously unoccupied locations that offered natural defensive advantages, while existing communities expanded to accommodate refugees from devastated rural areas. These population movements contributed to cultural mixing as Germanic, Roman, and other ethnic groups found themselves sharing fortified settlements where cooperation was essential for survival. The transformation of material culture during the crisis period reflected both practical adaptations to changed circumstances and the cultural influences that resulted from increased contact between previously separated populations. Pottery styles began incorporating decorative elements from various cultural traditions, while functional designs emphasized durability and utility rather than aesthetic sophistication. Metalworking focused on producing weapons, agricultural tools, and defensive equipment, while luxury items became rare as resources were redirected toward immediate survival needs. Technological innovation proceeded through practical necessity as communities developed new techniques for food preservation, weapon manufacture, and defensive construction that enabled survival during extended periods of isolation and siege. Archaeological evidence reveals improvements in grain storage methods, more efficient metalworking techniques, and innovative defensive technologies that enhance community security while reducing resource requirements. These technological developments often combined knowledge from various cultural traditions as communities drew upon diverse expertise to address common challenges. The gradual emergence of new political structures that had characterized the late 3rd century crisis accelerated dramatically during the early decades of the 4th century as imperial authority in the Rhine Delta became increasingly nominal, while local strongmen consolidated practical control over territories that Rome could no longer effectively govern. The reign of Constantine brought temporary stability to the broader empire, but his administrative reforms and military reorganization actually hastened the dissolution of Roman control in peripheral regions like the Batavian territories, where imperial resources were systematically redirected towards defending more strategically valuable provinces closer to the Mediterranean core. The establishment of Constantinople as the new eastern capital in 330 AD marked a decisive shift in imperial priorities that left the Rhine frontier increasingly isolated from central decision-making processes and resource allocation systems. Archaeological evidence from administrative sites in the Rhine Delta reveals the systematic abandonment of Roman government facilities during the 330s and 340s, with official buildings stripped of valuable materials while archives were either destroyed or transported to more secure locations. The Great Basilica at Nijmegen, which had served as the primary judicial and administrative centre for the region, shows clear evidence of deliberate dismantling during this period, with marble columns, bronze fittings and mosaic floors removed for transport to other locations where imperial authority remained viable. Roman military withdrawal proceeded through a series of strategic redeployments that gradually emptied frontier garrisons while concentrating remaining forces at key strongpoints along major transportation routes. The Rhine fleet, already weakened by decades of reduced funding and maintenance, was formally disbanded around 340 AD, with surviving vessels either scuttled to prevent barbarian capture or transferred to river systems where imperial control remained intact. Archaeological investigations at former naval facilities reveal the systematic destruction of shipbuilding equipment, the filling of dry docks, and the conversion of military harbours to civilian use as communities adapted abandoned military infrastructure to serve local commercial and defensive needs. The final withdrawal of regular Roman legions from the Lower Rhine occurred during the 350s as Emperor Constantius II concentrated military resources for campaigns against Persian forces in the east and usurpers in Gaul. The last documented Roman military unit stationed in former Batavian territory, a detachment of the Legio I Minervia, departed around 355 AD, leaving behind only administrative personnel and local militia forces that lack the training, equipment, and organizational support necessary to maintain effective frontier defense. Contemporary sources describe emotional farewell ceremonies where Roman officers distributed weapons and military standards to local leaders while promising eventual return that both sides recognized as increasingly unlikely. Local defense arrangements that emerged following Roman military withdrawal reveal the sophisticated organizational capabilities that Romanized Batavian communities had developed during centuries of imperial administration. The fortified settlement at Cuisk expanded its defensive perimeter to encompass additional agricultural areas while establishing subordinate strongpoints at river crossings and road junctions that enabled coordinated resistance against barbarian raiding parties. Archaeological evidence reveals the construction of signal towers, weapons workshops, and training facilities that supported a regional defense network capable of mobilizing several thousand armed men within days of receiving warning of approaching threats. These local military organizations drew leadership from families that combined Roman administrative experience with traditional Germanic warrior traditions, creating hybrid command structures that proved remarkably effective in the challenging circumstances of the late imperial period. Marcus Flavius Civilis, a descendant of both the famous 1st century rebel leader and Roman senatorial families, established himself as the dominant military commander in the central Rhine Delta through a combination of inherited wealth, personal charisma, and tactical expertise gained through service in imperial campaigns against Gothic and Alemannic invaders. His forces, numbering approximately 3,000 infantry and 500 cavalry, represented the most formidable military organization between the abandoned Roman frontier and the Frankish territories across the Rhine. The economic foundation supporting these local defence efforts derived from agricultural surpluses generated by intensive cultivation methods developed during the crisis period, supplemented by commercial revenues from trade relationships that continued despite political fragmentation. Archaeological analysis of storage facilities reveals sophisticated grain management systems that could maintain food supplies for extended siege operations, while supporting the livestock herds that provided both sustenance and military mobility. The workshops established within fortified settlements produced weapons, armour, and military equipment that met or exceeded Roman military standards while incorporating design innovations that reflected practical battlefield experience against barbarian opponents. Frankish expansion into former Roman territories proceeded through a combination of military conquest, diplomatic negotiation, and gradual settlement that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of both Roman administrative systems and local political dynamics. The Frankish Confederation that emerged during the 4th century represented a significant evolution from earlier Germanic tribal organizations, combining traditional warrior leadership with administrative capabilities that enabled effective governance of diverse populations across extensive territories. Archaeological evidence from Frankish settlement sites reveals planned communities that incorporated both Germanic architectural traditions and Roman urban planning principles, suggesting deliberate efforts to create hybrid cultural environments that could accommodate multiple ethnic groups. The Frankish military organization that challenged remaining Roman authority in the Rhine region represented a formidable combination of traditional Germanic warrior culture and tactical innovations derived from extensive contact with Roman military systems. Frankish warbands typically operated in formations of 500 to 1,000 warriors organized around extended kinship groups led by experienced commanders who had often served in Roman auxiliary units before returning to their tribal territories. These forces possessed superior mobility compared to traditional Roman legions, while maintaining discipline and tactical coordination that enabled complex military operations across multiple theatres simultaneously. Frankish weapons technology reflected centuries of technological exchange with Roman military systems while incorporating distinctive Germanic innovations that provided tactical advantages in the specific combat environments of the Rhine frontier. Archaeological excavations at Frankish weapon workshops reveal sophisticated metalworking techniques that produced iron spearheads, sword blades, and axe heads that surpassed Roman military equipment in both quality and effectiveness. The famous Frankish Francisca, a throwing axe designed for both ranged and hand-to-hand combat, became a signature weapon that enabled Frankish warriors to disrupt enemy formations before closing for melee combat, where their superior physical conditioning and aggressive fighting techniques provided decisive advantages. The siege of the fortified settlement at Toxandria in 358 AD demonstrated Frankish capabilities in complex military operations that required sustained coordination between multiple warbands operating under unified command. The Frankish forces, led by King Clodio, invested the settlement with approximately 8,000 warriors while maintaining supply lines that stretched across nearly 50 kilometres of hostile territory. Archaeological evidence from the siege site reveals sophisticated earthwork fortifications that enabled the attackers to approach the settlement walls while remaining protected from defensive fire, while the discovery of Roman-style siege equipment suggests that Frankish forces had acquired advanced military engineering capabilities through contact with imperial military systems. The negotiated surrender that concluded the siege established precedents for Frankish treatment of conquered populations that would characterize subsequent expansion throughout former Roman territories. Rather than implementing the wholesale destruction and population displacement that had characterized earlier barbarian conquests, Clodio offered generous terms that preserved local property rights, religious practices, and administrative structures while requiring acknowledgement of Frankish political authority and payment of tribute in agricultural products and manufactured goods. These arrangements enabled rapid territorial expansion while maintaining the productive capacity that supported continued military operations and administrative development. Frankish settlement patterns in conquered territories revealed careful planning that balanced military security requirements with economic productivity while accommodating the cultural preferences of diverse population groups. New Frankish settlements typically featured central compounds where warrior families established their residences alongside craftsmen and agricultural workers who provided essential services, while existing Romano-Batavian communities were permitted to maintain their traditional settlement patterns under Frankish political supervision. Archaeological evidence from mixed settlements reveals gradual cultural integration as intermarriage, commercial relationships, and shared defensive responsibilities created hybrid communities that combined Frankish, Roman, and Germanic cultural elements. The fate of the remaining Batavian population under Frankish rule depended largely on their social status, economic resources, and willingness to accommodate new political arrangements that fundamentally altered traditional power relationships while preserving certain aspects of established social organisation. Wealthy Romano-Batavian families who possessed substantial landholdings and commercial enterprises typically negotiated favourable arrangements that preserved their economic positions while requiring acknowledgement of Frankish political authority and payment of tribute that was often less onerous than late Roman taxation had been. These accommodations enabled many elite families to maintain their social status while adapting to new political circumstances that offered opportunities for advancement through military service or commercial partnerships with Frankish leaders. Common farmers and craftsmen experienced more dramatic changes as Frankish settlement policies redistributed land ownership while establishing new labour obligations that differed significantly from Roman administrative practices. Archaeological evidence from rural settlements reveals the construction of new residential complexes that housed Frankish warrior families alongside Romano-Batavian agricultural workers who provided labour services in exchange for protection and access to land for subsistence cultivation. These arrangements, while representing significant departures from traditional Roman property relationships, often provided greater security and economic stability than the chaotic conditions that had characterized the final decades of imperial rule. The integration of Romano-Batavian military expertise into Frankish military organizations proceeded through voluntary recruitment and negotiated agreements that recognized the value of Roman training and equipment while adapting these capabilities to Frankish tactical requirements and command structures. Former Roman auxiliary veterans found opportunities for continued military service under Frankish leaders who appreciated their professional skills while requiring loyalty oaths that transferred their allegiance from distant imperial authorities to local Frankish kings who could provide immediate rewards and advancement opportunities. Archaeological evidence from Frankish military sites reveals the continued use of Roman military equipment alongside Germanic weapons, suggesting successful integration of different military traditions within unified command structures. Cultural transformation under Frankish rule proceeded gradually as communities adapted to new political arrangements while maintaining essential aspects of their established social organization and cultural practices. Romano-Batavian families continued to use Latin for legal and commercial purposes while learning Frankish languages for political and military communication, creating multilingual communities where different languages served specific functional roles within increasingly complex social hierarchies. Religious practices similarly evolved through accommodation rather than replacement, with Christian communities maintaining their established worship patterns while incorporating Germanic spiritual elements that reflected their new political circumstances. Archaeological evidence for the transition period reveals dramatic changes in burial practices that reflected the cultural negotiations occurring within communities experiencing fundamental political transformation. Romano-Batavian cemeteries dating to the late 4th and early 5th centuries show increasing diversity in burial orientations, grave goods, and funerary rituals that suggest communities experimenting with different cultural approaches while maintaining certain traditional practices that preserved family and community identity. Frankish burial sites reveal similar cultural mixing, with Germanic warrior burials incorporating Roman luxury goods, while Christian grave markers appear alongside traditional Germanic religious symbols. Material culture transformation accelerated during the transition period as Frankish craftsmen introduced new decorative styles and manufacturing techniques, while Romano-Batavian artisans adapted their skills to serve new markets and cultural preferences. Pottery production shifted toward hybrid styles that combined Germanic decorative motifs with Roman functional designs, creating distinctive regional variants that reflected the cultural mixing occurring within Frankish territories. Metalworking similarly evolved through technological exchange as Frankish smiths learned Roman techniques while contributing Germanic innovations that enhanced both military and civilian production capabilities. Settlement pattern changes revealed the systematic reorganization of territorial control as Frankish leaders established new administrative centres while abandoning Roman urban sites that no longer served their military and political requirements. The former Roman administrative centre at Nijmegen was systematically dismantled during the 380 s, with building materials transported to new Frankish strongholds that better reflected Germanic concepts of political authority and territorial control. Archaeological surveys reveal the establishment of numerous small fortified settlements that controlled agricultural areas and transportation routes, while providing defensive positions that could support coordinated resistance against external threats. Agricultural reorganization under Frankish rule involved the redistribution of land holdings according to Germanic inheritance practices and military service obligations that differed fundamentally from Roman property law and taxation systems. Large villa estates were typically divided among multiple Frankish warrior families who established smaller agricultural units that combined subsistence farming with specialized production for military and commercial purposes. Archaeological evidence reveals the abandonment of Roman agricultural infrastructure, including elaborate irrigation systems and specialized storage facilities that required intensive maintenance and coordinated management beyond the capabilities of smaller farming units. The decline of specialized craft production reflected both the disruption of long-distance trade networks and the different economic priorities that characterized Frankish society compared to the commercial orientation that had developed during the Roman period. Pottery workshops that had previously produced vessels for export throughout northern Europe shifted to serving local markets with simpler designs that required less specialized skills and equipment. Similarly, metalworking concentrated on producing weapons and agricultural tools rather than luxury goods or commercial products that had limited markets within the more militarized society that emerged under Frankish rule. Commercial relationships evolved as Frankish leaders established new trade networks that connected their territories with other Germanic kingdoms, while maintaining certain connections with remaining Roman provinces where profitable exchange opportunities continued to exist. Archaeological evidence reveals the continued circulation of Roman coins, alongside new Frankish currency systems that reflected changing political relationships and economic priorities. Merchant activities adapted to new political circumstances as traders developed relationships with Frankish leaders, while maintaining their traditional commercial connections wherever possible. Religious transformation proceeded through complex negotiations between Christian communities, traditional Germanic spiritual practices, and the political requirements of Frankish rule that sought to maintain social stability while asserting new forms of political authority. Christian churches continued to operate under Frankish protection, while adapting their practices to accommodate Germanic cultural elements and political expectations that differed from previous Roman arrangements. Archaeological evidence from church sites reveals architectural modifications that incorporated Germanic decorative elements while maintaining essential Christian liturgical requirements. The emergence of hybrid cultural institutions reflected the practical requirements of governing diverse populations, while maintaining the military effectiveness that enabled continued Frankish expansion and territorial control. Legal systems evolved to accommodate both Germanic customary law and Roman legal traditions through hybrid procedures that addressed specific cases according to the cultural background and social status of the individuals involved. These legal innovations provided models for subsequent Frankish territorial expansion, while demonstrating the administrative sophistication that characterized successful barbarian kingdoms during the transition period. Demographic changes during the transition period included both voluntary migration and forced population movements as communities responded to changing political circumstances and economic opportunities. Some Romano-Batavian families emigrated to remaining Roman territories where they could maintain their traditional cultural practices and political loyalties, while others chose to remain and adapt to Frankish rule through accommodation strategies that preserved essential aspects of their social and economic positions. Archaeological evidence suggests that overall population levels remained relatively stable despite political upheaval, indicating that Frankish settlement policies successfully maintained agricultural productivity while integrating diverse population groups. The technological legacy of the transition period encompassed innovations in military equipment, agricultural techniques, and craft production that combined Germanic and Roman knowledge systems while addressing the specific challenges of governing territories that bridged different cultural traditions. These technological developments influenced subsequent European development patterns while demonstrating the creative potential that emerged from cultural contact and exchange during periods of political transformation. Yet, as Frankish rule solidified across the former Batavian territories during the 5th century, the distinct identity that had characterized this remarkable Germanic tribe began its gradual dissolution into the broader tapestry of early medieval European civilization. The survival of Batavian identity during the immediate post-Roman period depended largely on the preservation of family genealogies, place names, and local traditions within communities that maintained some continuity despite fundamental political changes. Frankish administrative records from the 6th and 7th centuries, preserved in monastery archives throughout the Low Countries, contain scattered references to individuals bearing names derived from Batavian origins, though these references become increasingly rare as Germanic naming conventions merged with Latin Christian traditions. The Liber Historia Francorum, compiled around 727 AD, includes brief mentions of settlements where the ancient Batavi once dwelled, suggesting that geographical associations with the tribal name persisted even after the disappearance of distinct political organisation. Medieval chroniclers writing in monastery scriptoriums across the Frankish kingdoms preserved fragments of Batavian history through their compilation of classical sources, particularly drawing from Tacitus's Germania and Histories, to construct genealogies that connected contemporary noble families with ancient Germanic tribal leaders. The Chronicle of Fredegar, composed during the mid-7th century, describes certain Frankish aristocratic lineages as descendants of the brave Batavi who served the Roman emperors, though these claims likely reflected political propaganda rather than accurate genealogical records. Monastic libraries at Utrecht, Echternach and Saint-Bertin maintain copies of classical texts that preserve detailed accounts of Batavian military exploits, ensuring that educated clerics retained access to historical information about the tribe's remarkable relationship with Rome. Local folklore throughout the Rhine Delta preserved oral traditions that maintained distorted but recognisable memories of Batavian achievements, particularly their legendary swimming abilities and their role in major Roman military campaigns. Medieval peasant communities along the Rhine and its tributaries told stories of ancient warriors who could cross rivers in full armour, tales that clearly derived from classical accounts of Batavian amphibious operations, but had evolved through centuries of oral transmission into semi-mythical narratives. Archaeological evidence from medieval settlement sites reveals the continued veneration of ancient burial mounds and stone monuments that local populations associated with their tribal ancestors, suggesting that landscape features served as physical anchors for collective memory, even when specific historical details had been forgotten. The ecclesiastical transformation of the Low Countries during the early medieval period created new institutional frameworks for preserving historical memory, as Christian monasteries established themselves on sites previously associated with Germanic religious practices. The monastery of Verden, founded around 800 AD near the ancient Batavian religious centre at Elst, maintained archives that included transcriptions of Roman inscriptions and local traditions about pre-Christian spiritual practices. These monastic records, while filtered through Christian interpretative frameworks, preserved valuable information about Batavian religious sites, seasonal festivals, and ritual practices that would otherwise have disappeared completely from historical memory. Place name evidence throughout the medieval Low Countries reveals the persistence of toponyms derived from Batavian origins, though linguistic evolution and administrative changes gradually obscured their etymological connections to the ancient tribe. The region known as Bethue, encompassing the traditional heartland of Batavian territory between the Rhine and Waal rivers, preserves a clearly recognisable derivation from the tribal name, while numerous smaller settlements maintain names that incorporated Germanic elements associated with Batavian cultural practices. Medieval charter documents from the 9th and 10th centuries record dozens of place names that linguistic analysis has connected to Batavian origins, though contemporary scribes showed no awareness of these etymological relationships. The Carolingian Renaissance of the 8th and 9th centuries marked a crucial period for the preservation and transmission of classical knowledge about the Batavi, as scholars associated with Charlemagne's court systematically copied and studied Roman historical texts that contained detailed accounts of Germanic tribal history. Alcuin of York, serving as educational advisor to Charlemagne, supervised the production of manuscript copies of Tacitus's works that ensured the survival of the most important classical sources for Batavian history. These Carolingian manuscripts, distributed to monastery libraries throughout the expanding Frankish Empire, provided the textual foundation that enabled later medieval scholars to reconstruct Batavian history from classical sources. The emergence of vernacular literature during the High Middle Ages created new opportunities for incorporating Batavian historical memories into popular narrative traditions, though these literary treatments often emphasize legendary elements rather than historical accuracy. The Gesta Danorum of Saxo Grammaticus, composed around 1200 AD, includes episodes that appear to derive from garbled memories of Batavian military exploits, while various Germanic heroic poems contain references to ancient warriors associated with the Rhine Delta region. These literary works, while historically unreliable, demonstrate the continued cultural resonance of Batavian martial traditions within medieval Germanic consciousness. Medieval cartographic traditions preserved geographical knowledge about Batavian territories through maps that maintained classical place names and territorial boundaries, even when contemporary political organisation bore no resemblance to ancient tribal arrangements. The Tabula Peutingeriana, a medieval copy of a Roman road map, clearly depicts the Insula Batavorum with its distinctive river boundaries, while later medieval maps produced in monastery scriptoriums continue to identify the region with its ancient tribal inhabitants. These cartographic traditions provided visual representations that reinforced textual memories of Batavian territorial extent and geographical significance. The Renaissance rediscovery of classical antiquity during the 15th and 16th centuries initiated a systematic scholarly revival of interest in Batavian history that fundamentally transformed understanding of the ancient tribe's significance within broader European historical development. Humanist scholars working in universities throughout the Low Countries began producing critical editions of classical texts while conducting archaeological investigations that revealed physical evidence of Batavian settlements and cultural achievements. Erasmus of Rotterdam, writing in the early 16th century, praised the Batavi as exemplars of Germanic virtue and military prowess, establishing interpretative frameworks that would influence scholarly and popular understanding for centuries. The political implications of Batavian historical memory became particularly significant during the Dutch revolt against Spanish rule, as Protestant intellectuals drew explicit parallels between ancient Batavian resistance to Roman oppression and contemporary struggles for religious and political independence. Hugo Grotius, in his influential work De Antiquitate Republicae Batavicae, published in 1610, argued that the ancient Batavi had maintained essential freedoms even under Roman rule, providing historical precedents for Dutch claims to autonomous governance. These scholarly arguments transformed Batavian history from academic curiosity into political propaganda that legitimized resistance against foreign domination. The establishment of the Dutch Republic created institutional support for historical research that systematically investigated Batavian archaeological sites while promoting popular awareness of the tribe's historical significance. The University of Leiden, founded in 1575, became a centre for classical scholarship that produced definitive editions of Tacitus and other sources while training generations of scholars who specialised in Germanic tribal history. Archaeological investigations sponsored by Dutch universities revealed substantial physical evidence of Batavian settlements, military equipment, and religious practices that corroborated classical textual sources while providing new insights into daily life and cultural organisation. Baroque artistic traditions in the Dutch Republic incorporated Batavian themes into monumental paintings, sculptures and architectural decorations that celebrated the ancient tribe's martial virtues while drawing explicit connections to contemporary Dutch military achievements. Rembrandt van Rijn's painting The Conspiracy of Claudius Civilis, completed around 1661, depicted the Batavian rebel leader as a heroic figure whose resistance to Roman tyranny prefigured Dutch struggles for independence. These artistic works, displayed in public buildings throughout the Dutch Republic, ensured that Batavian historical memory reached broad popular audiences while reinforcing political messages about Dutch national character and historical destiny. The French Revolutionary period brought renewed political significance to Batavian historical memory as revolutionary ideologists sought classical precedents for republican government and popular resistance to monarchical authority. The establishment of the Batavian Republic in 1795, following French military intervention in the Dutch Republic, represented the most explicit political revival of Batavian symbolism in European history. Revolutionary leaders consciously adopted the tribal name to emphasize their commitment to ancient Germanic traditions of popular assembly and collective decision-making that they contrasted with aristocratic privilege and monarchical despotism. The Batavian Republic's constitution, promulgated in 1798, included explicit references to ancient Batavian political traditions, while establishing governmental structures that supposedly revived tribal democratic practices within modern institutional frameworks. Revolutionary propaganda emphasized the historical continuity between ancient Batavian resistance to Roman imperialism and contemporary struggles against monarchical oppression, creating powerful symbolic connections that resonated with popular audiences throughout the Low Countries. Street festivals, public ceremonies, and educational programs systematically promoted Batavian historical consciousness, while encouraging citizens to identify with their ancient tribal ancestors. The Napoleonic transformation of the Batavian Republic into the Kingdom of Holland in 1806 marked the end of explicit political revival of Batavian identity, though scholarly and popular interest in tribal history continued to develop throughout the 19th century. Romantic nationalist movements throughout Europe drew inspiration from Germanic tribal traditions, while archaeological discoveries in the Rhine Delta provided increasingly sophisticated understanding of Batavian material culture and social organization. The establishment of professional archaeological institutions in the Netherlands created systematic research programs that reveal the complexity and sophistication of Batavian civilization, while challenging earlier assumptions about barbarian cultural limitations. Modern archaeological discoveries beginning in the late 19th century revolutionized scholarly understanding of Batavian history through systematic excavation of major settlement sites, military installations, and religious centers that provided unprecedented insights into tribal life and cultural development. The excavation of the legionary fortress at Nijmegen revealed detailed evidence of Roman-Batavian military cooperation, while investigations at rural villa sites demonstrated the extent of Romanization within elite Batavian society. These archaeological findings, published in professional journals and popular publications, created new appreciation for the complexity of cultural interaction between Germanic tribes and the Roman Empire. The development of scientific archaeological methods during the 20th century enabled increasingly sophisticated analysis of Batavian material culture, settlement patterns, and economic organization that challenged traditional assumptions about barbarian society and cultural development. Radiocarbon dating, stratigraphic analysis, and environmental reconstruction techniques provided precise chronological frameworks while revealing the environmental context that shaped Batavian adaptation to their distinctive riverine homeland. Interdisciplinary research programs combining archaeology, linguistics, and environmental science created comprehensive understanding of Batavian society that surpassed the limited perspective available from classical textual sources alone. Contemporary archaeological research continues to reshape understanding of Batavian history through discoveries that reveal previously unknown aspects of tribal culture, military organization, and religious practices. Recent excavations at Thiel have uncovered extensive evidence of specialized craft production that demonstrates sophisticated technological capabilities. while underwater archaeology in the Rhine system has revealed preserved wooden artifacts that provide unprecedented insights into Batavian boat construction and riverine adaptation. These ongoing discoveries ensure that scholarly understanding of Batavian history continues to evolve while maintaining public interest in the tribe's remarkable achievements. The legacy of the Batavi extends far beyond their historical significance as a Germanic tribe that achieved unique accommodation with Roman imperial power. Their story illuminates fundamental processes of cultural contact, adaptation, and transformation that characterized the ancient world, while providing insights into the complex negotiations between local identity and imperial authority that shaped European development. The survival of Batavian historical memory through medieval chronicles, Renaissance scholarship, and modern archaeological research demonstrates the enduring human fascination with communities that successfully navigated the challenges of cultural change while maintaining essential aspects of their distinctive identity. The Batavian experience offers valuable perspectives on contemporary questions about cultural integration, political autonomy, and the preservation of local traditions within larger political frameworks. Their remarkable military achievements, sophisticated political organisation, and successful economic adaptation provide historical examples of successful cultural negotiation that remain relevant to modern discussions about diversity, integration, and the balance between local autonomy and broader political unity. As archaeological research continues to reveal new aspects of Batavian civilization, their historical legacy continues to evolve while maintaining its significance for understanding the complex processes that shaped European cultural development and continue to influence contemporary society.